Good to see you guys again today. Last night, some of you guys were not able to access the chat rooms as we are implementing those changes we talked about for so long. We're going to get everybody in there, making sure that some of the new code does not permit breaching of any type. We had it open in several ways last time. We took that down. We are enhancing security for your sakes, so that you guys we don't want the data here trackable, added to anybody's algorithm, any of those things. Not to mention, it's not like you have to, it's 100% hidden or anything. Somebody wants to see what we're saying, they can join the chat rooms likewise. But we're doing it for safety concerns, just in case any issues pop up. To keep everybody safe. Also, the moderators have to have absolute control over what happens in the chat rooms. And so they have an expansive set of controls to do what they need to implement, right? And they're level-headed, so I'm sure that nobody will act out of emotional reasons. But as far as our policies will dictate, we will have a new set of policies for the COT chat, as it will be very immersive, you could say. And second, you remember you guys were discussing something about PayPal policies. I looked into that and actually spoke with PayPal extensively. Here's what's happening. You might want to know this. With any financial institution, as of a few days ago, because the campaign year is up, right? They're campaigning. They're going to be talking politics and everything else. This goes with your personal banks, your credit cards, and everything. It's in everything. Should a person start raising money or start doing things based in false pretenses, as what happened a long time ago with all the fake news and things like that, they will fine you $2,500. That's with every single financial institution in America, all right, and abroad. All right, so just it's not just with PayPal. PayPal is actually a bank. That stipulation with the bank as part of their policies, and that goes for every single financial institution. So if people start speaking a bunch of fake political things, right, they're going to be fined for it. That's what that's for. That's exactly what that's for. Because, of course, a bank is not going to track what you're saying. But if you raise money with a bank, right, then your disclosure of what you're raising money for has to be notated with that bank. And so that's what they're going by. And there will be some people, they can't say everything they want to say. If they find out it's false, well, then they're going to be like Joe Biden came out and said something that was false, and it was immediately handled, right? It was. He said something that was not quite right the other day. And there was some repercussions for that, right? It will expand, no doubt, right? Think of it as a pilot program. And it's part of this open society stuff where you just can't make up anything. They will research everything being said, especially in this political field. Why? Because death came about last time. You guys may not know this, but a lot of people have died because of political reasons, directly related to political reasons. You may not know this, but there are crazy people out there. People who wait for the chance to destroy another person mortally by the political statements of others, right? They're driven by darkness. This is a very dark entity that's driving this whole thing. Some of the people you may call them crazy, call them whatever you want to, but it has turned deadly. At least 6,000 people have died because of political statements. And at least, 70 or 80,000 people have been jailed because of their involvement with that. And they are looking for more. Believe me when I tell you that agencies are combing through everything everybody says. And if they start to relate it back to some violence, people are going to start being held. It's turning serious in that respect. And this is going to fall on the shoulders of people just like me, and others who would dare talk about Christ and how he is the only way, the truth, and the life. And when they have some political policy, to tell everybody that that political policy is not founded in Christian values and the morals are corrupted on it. How dare anybody like me say anything like that? And so that those are going to be the repercussions, right? So that's where that comes from. Some of the fines go up to $15,000. And just so you understand that, they go up to 15 grand, right? We don't have to worry about we certainly do hope we don't get those fines, because, boy, that wouldn't be good. But we're not going to get those fines. I'm very selective in what I talk about, what I say, believe it or not. I don't get into emotional battles over politics. I don't play those games, right? I'll never be in those games. I believe what the kingdom is about, not what man's word is about. So I don't do that. So you guys don't have to worry about that. If I do face repercussions, it'll be from something totally different, non-related to politics at all. It'll be in a different area altogether. So that's how those things work. All right. So now, given those facts, right, we have a discussion to be had today. I'm sure that a lot of people are wondering. Oh, before I start this discussion, I want to ask you guys something here briefly. How much do you guys know about sound waves? Nothing theoretical, but anybody have direct knowledge on sound waves, specifically in the medical field? Because if they don't come out with these cures, it's something that a person can do with a microscope that they buy from somewhere. They can do that right there in their home. In fact, you have everything you need right in your homes right now, right? You have what you need to destroy cancer cells. And I'm just, it kind of eats away at me. Because once you observe it with your own eyes, once a person who is totally taken by cancer, once they recover within about, like a week or something like that, and it's no medication or anything, but because of a finding that took place back in the 60s, and once you apply those findings, of which you guys have that capability, if you have a cellular phone, you have the computer, you have the same computing power. You have a lot more computing power to generate certain frequency combinations that will attack and destroy and inhibit the growth of any cancer cell, right? You probably need a microscope to observe the difference, because as you're doing something on the microscope, it happens right before your eyeballs. It will destroy a cell right before your eyes. And it takes, once you observe that and tune it into the right frequency, it does wonders. It does wonders. And so I'm hoping all this will be out. Now, I know that people have attempted this, but personally, I don't believe it should be handled by a novice, right? You can't play 3 frequencies because you have frequency cancellation. Can't do that. You'll have 0 results. You always play 2. They found out a long time ago when you play pairs that are 11 intervals apart, specifically 11, right? 11 meaning on the 11th one, you reach almost to the other scale. They have to be 11 apart. Once you do that, that activates, or it will inhibit the resonance within a cell. And then you have everything starts happening. You start mixing frequencies. You develop a brand new frequency. You can actually cancel out one frequency by another, right? But you guys have a cell phone, right? In that cell phone's a tone generator. It has a clock that's pretty accurate. And believe me, it makes a difference. It works with migraines is one of the biggest examples. People with migraines, when they do something with their cell phones, the migraines stop within about 30 to 40 seconds. They just stop. And it really blows people away when they find out their migraines are gone. They're like, what in the world? What happened here? Or your jaws will start to tingle in every single case. That's when you know it's working. Your jaws will start to tingle. And it often regenerates it lets your body regenerate saliva. You know what saliva does in your mouth? It pushes out bacteria and everything else. Not just any saliva, but very concentrated saliva that starts to soak your mouth and push everything out. It's almost like an instant pain reliever. If you have any type of infection in your gums or anything like that, that saliva will start to force that out because it's packed full of antibiotics. All of that with frequency, with sound. And believe it or not, in space, right, those sounds are very controlled, very controlled. Every single planet gives off a resonance. Based on our, and this is going to sound kind of strange tonight, right? Because you don't think of space as being part of a mechanism that is specifically designed for sustaining life here on this planet. You wouldn't think that every planet in our solar system is specifically putting off a frequency that, by the way, is tunable, trackable, replicatable, and you can apply it that same way. You wouldn't think that, but it does, almost like one big machine. When I tell you what, with the way our universe, the solar system is set up, it's perfect for sustaining life. And all you have to do is think about something. You're on a ball, right? You're on a ball. We breathe nitrogen, mostly, oxygen, and some other things. We breathe it. What we breathe is sustained. What you breathe is necessary for the body, right? And somebody says 432, 440, and 452. Wrong. Those are not the right ones. Unfortunately, they're not the right ones. And again, don't feel bad, because people talk about sound. They talk about that a lot on the internet, right? I've been waiting for some of the releases of what I have observed a long time ago, and I know that other people have. In fact, there are people who have been severely depressed that they were not able to share that knowledge with other folks. Really, it's natural. It's a life-sustaining frequency. One of them is, and then of course 11 intervals apart. Once you hit that 11th harmonica up from that initial frequency, everything happens. It also has to be dead center of the spectrum itself, because light and come to find out, light and sound are essentially one and the same when you're dealing with cellular life, right? They're one and the same. So photons, sound waves, all that good stuff, they do something very important for us, right? It's one of the reasons they believe, as this is them, why your soul is locked into your body, right? Somebody says 528, that's a base frequency used in a medical field at very high levels. That is one of the active frequencies, yes. Now you've hit right there dead center at the spectrum 528 is. And if you've ever replicated that 528 hertz, it's actually 528 point something hertz. Once you replicate that, you notice the agitation in your skin first. You'll notice that. I believe if you play it at maybe about 2 or 3 decibels continuously, it begins to do something to your flesh. But it's a rejuvenating type of feeling that you get. The same thing they observed in the ocean when they essentially put a speaker in a almost like a plexiglass casing, and as the plexiglass vibrated, right? Because that plexiglass was tuned. It was tuned because they made it so thick. Its tensile strength was a specific amount. When they played this thing, DNA began to form from ocean water out of nowhere. That's what they observed. And it was really, it was really something. Of course, when those discoveries are made, there are very evil people in the world, right? And they want people to follow a specific program. And they do not want everybody to prosper in this world, right? They don't. In fact, they want certain people to die out altogether. They do. And it just so happens that there are certain genetics within the races. That's what they're after. For example, they're not, when they're looking at a specific race, say like Native American, they don't want all Native Americans to die. They want a specific gene that's found in Native Americans to be gone. African Americans, same thing. They want a specific gene within African Americans to be gone. They want a specific gene within Asian folks to be gone, right? They know what the races are, and most people do not. They don't know. They don't know what an Asian is. They don't know what a Native American is. They don't know what a Hebrew is. They don't know what an Egyptian is. Right? They don't know what a Caucasian and what's called a stemmed Caucasian is. They don't know. Most people don't know what those things are, right? Because you're dealing with a bunch of mixture of the races that came up with the different races, all having one key genetic component that is exactly alike. And it's more of is that separation of the races came due to when you mingle one species with another and you begin to biologically, tamper with genes and things of that nature, you come out with different types of people. There are 4 base races on the face of the earth. Everything stems from those 4 base races. Those 4 base races, you put them all together, they constitute one race, right? But before everybody jumps the gun, African American in America is not the same as Africans in Africa. It's not the same. So you have 7 different sub-races of black people. I believe you have 18 of Caucasian. I believe you have 12 of Asian. And I believe you have, I think it's more like 6. It's a very low number. It's like 6 or something like that for the Native Americans and Hebrews. They found out are a lot alike. In fact, a lot of people argue right now that Hebrews and Native Americans are one and the same. But they don't have a lot of separation between the two. So dealing with those different races, there's also compounds put into these races over time, right? And in your blood manufacturing center is the offset to keep you alive. Now, so it goes through a bunch of mumbo jumbo, but that is to say, just about everybody is mixed up and they don't really know what they are. And when you don't know what you are, you cannot use your full potential as far as genetics goes, right? And people are indeed different. Your bone structures are different. Your muscle systems are different. Your organs are different, right? Your skin is different. You're tuned to certain things, to certain environments, certain skill sets and certain abilities are innate to those races. It's a shame that the world is so separate because I'll tell you something collectively, if people were to work collectively, there's nothing they could not accomplish. And I say that because the skill sets will be perfectly matched. Did you not know that each one of the races has an expertise over an element in the world? They actually do. And historically, it's been proven over and over again through discoveries. And what they like to do and what each, specific race normally manufactures. But they'll never get together on that because there are people in the world. Their expertise is in division, which is why I like nothing of division, which is why I stray away from academia. Academia is almost like a poison that people can't get rid of, right? I want you guys to think of something. Then I have to take a break and we'll go into the space topic, but I want you guys to think of something. This world, right? When the races began again, after this earth was destroyed and everything had to start all over again, try to understand something. There were different types of people on Noah's Ark, meaning they were not all the same color. They weren't. As they began to rebuild and do things again, right? They began to build kingdoms. These kingdoms turned into nations. These nations split, they divided. More nations came up, more places came up, many kingdoms came up. And then they educated people inside the kingdoms for the sake of the kingdom, right? Everything they teach at school is to advance the nation you're part of. That's what they teach in schools, right? So then education, etiquette, and all these things are created by mankind, for mankind. People thought it necessary to educate certain people so they could help build these kingdoms, right? Because think of it this way. If you developed something at home and you had 3 children, right? If you die, Everything you invested in what you created dies with you. So how do you keep that going so that your children can finish what you did not? You educate them on what you built. You show them all the ins and outs. You educate them. And then they grow up. They're educated on what you built. They add their, intellect and skill sets to it. And they, in turn, educate their children to carry on from there. Well, before you know it, an entire empire is built. Why? Because you trained your children to continue the work you could not continue to work with, right? Why do you think people seek longevity? Because they don't want to pass on what they have invested their entire lives into, right, to their children so much. They want to continue on with their building, with their nation building, with their kingdom building, and everything else. Education is a big part of that. It became a staple. You have to educate people to get them to complete what you started. Psychologically, you get them to believe in what you started. And so you base education around a certain ideology, and every single generation that pops up and is trained, they're trained in what the first guy put forth and started building. This is why academia is like a poison, because the smartest person in the world is actually not the smartest person in the world. It's a person that knows all about what humanity has built, right? They may be smart in engineering, in computers. That doesn't make the guy a genius, because they may know nothing about plant life and what you can and cannot eat in the wild. They may know nothing about being in tune with animals and being able to read the body language of animals, which makes them very dumb, actually, doesn't it? It only makes them smart because of all this man-made stuff. You take away everything man ever created, right? Is that person so smart? No, they're not. They're going to be useless, aren't they? They're going to be useless. And see, academia teaches people how to interpret the world based on men's concepts. Nothing else, based on men's concepts. Let me ask you this. When you're reading the Word of God, why is it so difficult for people to receive the Word spiritually? It's not enough for them, is it? It's not enough to intuitively have an answer, right? They want to be able to articulate that answer, to own that answer, to break that answer down, to make it match in the world of academia. That doesn't work spiritually, right? It doesn't work spiritually. And when all this stuff is undone, when it's all undone, when it's all gone, then and only then are people going to really begin to absorb what was real or not. Okay, somebody had a question that they wanted to ask me. Somebody had a question. Somebody says, you're losing me? No, don't be lost. In this world look around you, everything around you, humanity has built, humanity has designed, humanity has improved upon, right? Everything. And everything we're teaching our children is for what? So that they can continue to build what somebody else started before them. That's very important to see. This distinction between God's kingdom and this reality that we live in is very important for people to see, that you do not mix the two. There are children right now who don't know the difference. They don't know the difference. They look at all this around them and they think God did it. That's what they think, right? They do. You start talking about money and the economy and people act like God did it. He didn't do that. Man did that. Mankind did that, right? So it's very important to know that distinction. You're in this world, not of this world, right? That's why, back to academia, that's why I kind of shy away from academia. Academia spawns an ego and pride. And I've got multiple degrees, but I would consider myself as dumb as a bucket of rocks. I would. But you know why? Because what truly makes a person smart is when they can align themselves with the Father and be in that accomplished way that the Lord approves of, not what man approves of, not the standard that man has given us. Because if educated people are so frightened of an EMP, do you know why? Because they can no longer do anything. They can't do anything if all the lights go out. What would they do? What would they eat? How would they warm themselves? Right? We've lost many of our skills to survive over time. We have. We can brag and have this false confidence, but even our food, if everything went out, that would be an instant issue. If a country decided to take America out, all they would have to do is take out our fast food restaurants. That's pretty much it, because people are losing the ability to cook. I'll give you an example. How many people in COT right now who can hear me? How many people know how to make bread from scratch? Something very simple. How many people know how to do it? How many people know how to make bread from scratch? You're not going to the store and buying some oven rolls or something like that. No, flour, water, salt, maybe some sugar, whatever the case is. You throw it in there. You know how to make it. How many people know how to make it? You see what I'm saying? A long time ago, everybody would have been like, oh, everybody knows that. But hardly anybody knows how to do that. They don't. That makes a person, right? These are skill sets necessary for life. How many people can extract water anywhere they go, even in a desert environment? I was left in a desert environment one time, and I was thirsty. Everything was chapped. I was chapped in places that are not supposed to be chapped. Everything was chapped. And then this old sergeant major asked me what I was doing, right? And technically, he was not a superior to me, if you know what I'm saying. So how dumb was I? But I'm the one that was thirsty. So this guy reaches down in the sand, and he makes some kind of odd looking shape. He stands in front of it so he casts shade on it. And in about 15 minutes, drips of water were coming out off the sand. I said, what in the world is this? What is this? And when he showed me, it kind of made me feel twice as dumb. Right? Knowing physics, how can you not know that? Right? How can you not know that? And people in places that are hot like Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, and all those, they do it all the time. You don't hear of a lot of people out there dying from dehydration. You just don't. When foreigners come over, they die from dehydration a lot, but not them. Strange, isn't it? Right? And we're talking about water, because the air has water in it, or you wouldn't be able to breathe it. They know how to extract water from the air and drink whenever they want to. They're very patient. They're very astute and calm about how they do it, but it's an amazing process. And you don't have to go through a bunch of these survival tricks that people say they know, because when you have to apply survival for real, right? And you've been sitting there in a textbook and something is supposed to work, you don't want to be that person where something is supposed to work and it does not work. You also don't want to gamble with your energy. You want to know exactly what you're doing. And there's so many skill sets lost. So many skill sets. So, folks, I'm just letting you know who I am, because I perceive, right, that some people love academia. I do not. It's a poison. Do I use what I learned in school? Of course I do, because I have to communicate with everybody else and use the same equipment you guys do, right? But I'll never drag that nonsense into my spiritual life. It is not needful for it. In fact, it contradicts spiritual truth too much for me. It causes a person to go bonkers. I was there once. I remember reading a scripture one time, and I was thinking about technical writing. And so I took that scripture and broke it down. I broke it down so much that it was no longer a scripture, right? I looked at every single word. I looked at sentence formation. I even went back to the Latin base language, in the Grecian base language, Aramaic Hebrew base language, certain Sanskrit. When you throw that into a language and you look at the formation of that too, I took it too far. And guess what I came up with? I came up with one solution. I should have never broke it down, because every single language, right, they have a way that you assemble the words for that language. And every single language was made from something. Remember one time I told you guys that the English language was formed from incantations. The English language is a witch's language. Remember I said that? It's a witch's language. You may not know that, but it is. It was formed from a bunch of incantations. The English languages. A lot of people don't know how the English language came about. It has a history, just like the Chinese language has a history, just like the Hebrew language has a history, just like the Grecian language has a history. All these languages, they have histories. Very seldom does anybody inspect them to see where these words come from. Like that word table, right? Where does that come from? You look in a dictionary, you're not going to find it. You had to go way back to see where the English language came from. And you'll find out that you're speaking incantations on a nonstop basis. Strange, isn't it? Even our language is tainted. As with most things. And all of this should let you know that the enemy is hidden in ways you would never discover. Right? Which means it's almost impossible for a person to live in this world and to be clean spiritually. Do you know that? You can't be clean spiritually living in this world. Because by way of our language, we are a standing offense. Every time we open up our mouth, we're offending what is holy. Isn't that something? Thank God for Christ. Because of all this stuff that Satan attempted to do, right? But he actually does. Christ, he paid the price for. He can absorb it. It is negated for our cause. He did that for us. We could never do that for ourselves. He did that for us. And if he did that for us, there are other things he has surely performed for us. You may not know what he has performed for you this day. You may be left with what you see with your eyes. But there are so many things that we did not see and don't know about. So many things we boast about that are good, which are actually very destructive. And all these things we don't know, which makes the person of Christ a very important figure in our lives. And without Christ, there is and can be no salvation. That means no other religion will do it for you. See how the more you know, the more you're accountable for, the more you're going to have weights on your shoulders because you understand even the wording that you're using is an offense to holiness, which makes us somewhat like foolish children, right? It does. When we are foolish when we become pious and brag about what we know and begin to utilize strange, unknown methods, even to us, to extract a spiritual truth. Wouldn't that be dangerous? How many of you would go out and grab Harry Potter's wand to extract the truth from the Bible? To me, that's akin to academia, utilizing academia to extract the truth of Scripture. That's what it's akin to. And I see it spreading all throughout the world. These ideologies of academia, people priding themselves on what they know from mankind, applying that to the holy word of God. I see it all the time. Satan leaves a footprint of confusion. God always left a trail of simplicity, a type of awakening in simplicity. Nothing with our Father is complicated. We complicate things because all too often we can't accept the simple truth of things. And we pride ourselves in having academia. So listen to me. If I were to ever pride myself by my accomplishments in college, multiple degrees, if I were to ever do that, then I'm lifting up the deeds of men above all what the Lord is doing. Do you know that? Can you see that instant conflict? Because how do we become prideful in what men have established and have that outweigh what the Lord gives us in simplicity? Like a 3-year-old may come up and tell you something that absolutely makes sense. Hmm? This is just a recheck of where we are, especially before we have a conversation that is steeped in academia. Because what we know of space, you have to use terms everybody's familiar with. Explanation by way of physics, right? Things that we may encounter. And they have been in peer-reviewed journals, discoveries of men. Then we begin to compare that with what the Lord has given us. And sometimes there's such a contrast in the truth we perceive, we don't know what to believe. Which is why I'm not going to explain it as though you're in some sort of documentary. But in the most simplest of terms, which, by the way, are usually the most unbelievable things, are extracted when you use simple terms. Keep that in mind. Because the question is, do we have a threat from space? Of course we do. Part of that threat in space is connected to every single last one of us. We interact with it daily. Daily. We take cues from it daily and we don't even know it. Can it be broken? Yes. Are there things coming that will destroy the surface of the earth? You better believe it is. Can anybody do anything about it? No, they cannot. That's why they're going to hide. That's why they spend all that money to hide in pressurized tombs, I'm going to call them. And there are lots of places underneath the ground. And if we talk about space, you have to know what's under your feet. You have to know that. The real threat to Earth you've seen for a very long time. You're well acquainted with those threats of space. But you could say they're in a sleep cycle right now. And everything is just now waking up. And as it wakes up, you might want to know the conditions that you will most certainly see on the face of the earth. Oh, and let me take a break in a few minutes. If anybody has heard of a threat today, I was going to send out some emails to a bunch of people. I believe that Steve was posting it. The Middle East has a real threat right now. It's not fake, it's real. It's a very real threat right now. Iran is losing its control over certain aspects of its people in a specific province. Now, I can't trust all news coming out, all things people are showing. I can't trust that. There's a lot of propaganda out there, right? Lots of propaganda. But you guys remember the statement, but I've used over and over again, right? About Saudi Arabia. It's going to, and it starts with a B. It's going to do something because it will be the center of attention. Because they're somewhat traitorous in their dealings. Now, you'll see it from over here. And how you feel about those situations is going to be a very defining moment for you. But you should never become fearful. That's happening. Remember, keep this in perspective with the Word of God. Everything that's happening, right? The Father permits. Everything. If a nuclear weapon went off, how many of you think that, man, if somebody launched a nuclear weapon right now, would it work? You know what the true answer is? No, it won't. That's what a lot of people don't know. It's what Oppenheimer documented too many times. You cannot set off a nuclear weapon when you want to. Anybody know why? It's something that's necessary for that nuclear reaction. The same thing why they have mechanisms in all of our radioactive, or not radioactive, but all of our nuclear reactors, right? When they are actually controlling the decay process by submersing rods and water or fluids, I should say, right? To turn steam turbines. They have to compensate electronically because at certain cycles and at certain times, the decay rate skyrockets. For example, you can have a rod, pull it out of the water instantly. It starts getting real hot, right? There are certain times when it may take 5 minutes for that rod to get hot. Let's say the temperature outside is 70 degrees. Inside or controlled atmospherics, environment, temperature, all that good stuff. You pull that rod out and it takes 2.5 minutes for that rod to reach, let's say 500 degrees. 2.5 minutes. There are certain days when you pull that rod out, it's going to take 15 seconds for that thing to reach about 2000 degrees. They have to know about these times. It's almost like a clock running, and the sun has a lot to do with it, right? So tracking the sun as intimate is very necessary when dealing with any type nuclear issue, because the sun will give it a go, no go. And if the sun decides to go into some premature cycle, of course, all of it works like clockwork. That's why we have something called atomic clocks. That word atomic stems from, something steeped in timekeeping, right? And the sun is our timekeeper, despite its activity. Despite its activity, it keeps its reality in check. It also deals with your personal computing devices more than you know, because without the sun, you're going to have an issue, a problem. The sun's influence goes far beyond the heliosphere. So technically, you could use it to a certain point outside of the heliosphere, and then it would totally break down, which is why some of the spacecraft have an analog equipment, secondary secondary crystals utilized in them, right, that only work in the presence of, say, pulsars or something like that, so that when they get out of one influence, they can go right into another, activated with the other type processor, right? Other type of counter, let's call them counters. Because whatever the sun was influencing, it won't work anymore, which means the sun, within the sun is a mechanism that has power to stop the clock in all microchips. And it's not an EMP. Do you know what would happen if the clock in your microchip stopped? Because crystals would no longer have their timekeeping abilities. Radiation, carbon, when they do carbon counts, right? And they're checking decay rates and all this. The decay rates will change with the sun. Figures could be ballooned, right? They could be totally collapsed. The sun is the constant element in most of our computing, all of our communications. It is that constant element, and without it, it's not going to work too well. Which raises another question. If our electronics will begin to break down without the sun's influence, then how far can they really get in space? And what are they actually using? Well, if you can seriously entertain that question, then you'll have one of the reasons for any type of surfacing of certain objects, things of that nature. If the sun is vital for these types of components, these types of frameworks that we have built called electronics, then many things would be around the sun for the sake of making those components. Wouldn't they? They wouldn't do too well outside that influence, because you're dealing with a new set of properties and everything else. Yeah, that works. Okay, folks, listen. That is to say, even the things you don't even think about are under God's control. They're under a design control, right? Man has no capability of doing what he wants to do unless certain physics enable that person to do it. And those physics, as people in positions know, physics can break down when they want to. They are by no means constant. They're not. Things have gone haywire over the course of years that it shouldn't have gone haywire. This is our Father's world. Satan may be the prince of the air, the ultimate influencer of all these kingdoms. But this is our Father's world. And what he promised, but it's not going to pass us, right? It's not going to pass us. But piece by piece, we're going to entertain exactly what he wrote. And space is going to be a big part of that. Space is going to cause parts of the greatest fear for humanity, because they'll look in the skies above and they won't understand what's happening. They're not going to understand what's happening. Some will know. Most will not. And then all the experts are going to come out and explain it away. And then the unbelievable will take place. Remember in the Bible when it says people are really going to have fear at looking after those things which are coming upon the earth. Well, if we were to go over a list of what people won't be afraid of, one of them is a meteor impact. Nobody cares. If 1,000 UFOs flew overhead, nobody cares. I'm just letting you know, nobody cares. If a bunch of, creatures came out of the ocean, nobody cares. Nobody cares. What would scare people, right, is something they cannot fight. What would scare people is an absence of what's been keeping everything together for so long. For example, something brutal, right? Like the flood, where people would drown. That would scare people. If people knew they were likely to die by drowning, that would scare people. If you also knew you're likely to die through suffocation and burning, that would scare you too, right? When the elements of war are going to be experienced as far as chemical weapons, that will begin to scare people. When some of the heavier weapons are introduced, that's going to cause a great amount of fear. They can get over all these other crises, right? They can get over all the other ones. But it's very difficult to get over the fact that our atmosphere is going to be changed. That there's nothing we can do against the alterations that will take place over 3/4 of this planet. That what's been long locked inside will no longer be locked inside. And it's by way of the heavens, things will be unleashed. Some scientists are scared right now because they said that there are bacteria that have been dormant for millions of years. And every single time the ice melts, they wake back up and they are indeed alive. They're alive again. Some scientists are worried at the sheer volume of the ice melt. You see an iceberg on top, you see the top of it, you don't see the bottom, right? Where the bottom may have had 1,200 feet of solid ice, there may be only, 50 feet left. It may be hanging on a popsicle stick thin sheet of ice that could give in at any moment. In a lot of cases, that's precisely what's happening. With these ice melts, bacteria is being released. Viruses that are neither considered to be alive or dead are being released. That means a brand new set of plagues. Forget about COVID-19, RSV, all these issues people are worried about. What about a supervirus that you can see with a magnifying glass? Something intrusive and deadly, a flesh-eating bacteria that takes its toll after 24 hours. Not 4 months, 24 hours. Like the scientist that actually stepped in a little puddle. His leg was itching him an hour later. The next day, they had to amputate both of his legs because they were eaten away. They have to cut the infected skin away to save the person's life. And the bacteria was huge, and then other scientists to go investigate what this one ran into. I believe what present count, more than 40 or 50. Same thing happened to less than 24 hours amputations. There were some deaths involved. Things like that are happening. New animals are being seen all the time. Species we're not used to. Exotic life that no one knows where they came from. Nobody cares if they came from space. All they know is these things. They hide. They mimic. It's not like they're spirits or anything. Nope, they're flesh and blood like you and I. Some sort of flesh and blood. There's certain areas people are moving away from. There are lots of things in the unseen world that are waking up right now. And in sync with that, you're going to see mankind totally go out of its way. There's a real problem in the Middle East. But I seriously doubt that anybody is going to react to it until a massive amount of lives are lost. I give it a window of time, and that exact scenario I just named will happen. A massive amount of people are about to lose their lives because they're going to underestimate the threat as being some sort of repetitious or some ploy, something of that nature, not understanding the complexities behind it and the coordination worldwide. Somebody said Japan's Coast Guard is reporting a third missile launch from North Korea. Yes, North Korea has gone nuts, firing missiles. One just happened, and they're all landing in international waters, except for, I believe, two. Two did not land in international waters, which isn't, an issue, right? In the meanwhile, Turkey and Russia have something to solve very quickly. And Russia's almost done cleansing. What they call that is a term they use. Cleansing is part of it. But there's a term they use right before they actually start fighting, before they commit to fighting. There's a term they use. And I think that people have gotten wind of Putin's, his style, right? It's starting to be read by people on the outside, which means something notable is about to take place. Because NATO knows when they're being targeted. And they're NATO held territories that are now being digitally marked by space technology. And if you don't think it's heated up in space, boy, you got something else coming. Even the Space Command continues to ask for more money because they're not ready. These guys, they know they have to be ready in 2023. They know that. That's a few months away, right? A few months away. The deadline to have these underground facilities retrofitted, that deadline passes in a few hours. In just a few hours, that deadline is going to pass. They have to be ready. And when you know it, at the same time, this deadline is coming. Something is breaking out in the Middle East. Big time. Right now, it's more of an act to salvage what they can salvage, to move the rest of the pieces into position and get some of those folks who need to be protected into other areas. I'll say something else. Anybody who's on the political front right now, they're going to be people of no interest here shortly. I'll explain that when I get back board and we have some things to go over. I'll be right back in just a few minutes right here at COT, everybody. Okay, you guys, I'm back again. I am back. All right. Boy. All right, guys, as I talk, as I discuss, all right, we're going to have, you guys can throw in a question here or there, but I'm going to break something down very easy for you so you can see it. First of all, Earth and space. How many people have been to space? Not too many. Okay. Which means we're left with our interpretation of space by what we see in the sky directly, number one. right? Looking up from the surface of the earth into the sky, which, by the way, I like to do. Right? So you could say my head is in the clouds to a degree, but also, not only that, but our perspective based on books, based on what other people have published, right? So let me ask you this question. How many of you actually, you trust the books you have read concerning space? Or how many would say they know a lot about space? I can tell you right now, I thought I knew a lot about space, right? But I really don't know a lot about space. There are a lot of folks who know a lot about space based on what is printed. But so let's get this established. You guys know what a theory is, right? A theory. A theory is an educated guess, and that educated guess is given by someone who is well established in the scientific world. Okay, so that means their guesses, as far as science goes, is based on their performance, is based on their work ethic and integrity, their efforts, and other things. That's what that is, right? So we basically know space by what we have seen ourselves and through reading what other people have published, and by way of the interpretation given to us by those in space stations, those who have gone on certain spacecraft. The first trips to space were very interesting, but now they're a phenomenon that people are very used to because they've been explained to them what's happening, right? Most astronauts have there's a gag order to a degree in certain areas. They have code names for lots of things. A strange star, for example, that does not mean they're looking at a star. That's not what that means. That means they've had a passage of a hot object is what that means. There are other words that they use where they say, something got close to us. If they think it's alive, a biological life form, sometimes they actually use that word critter, right? Amongst themselves. If they start snapping pictures, and it's pointed in a direction away from, for example, like the cameras on the ISSR, they can't quite get it with the ISS cameras. They'll do it with a personal device up in the observation platform on the ISS, and they'll pull down all the little, all the shields off the windows and start looking through and take pictures. And they've taken pictures of some big things and small things and things that pass right through the ISS, seemingly uninhibited by any solid surface. Can you imagine that? It'd be like a car riding through your car, but you can see every aspect of the car. Then you say, well, what was that? Everybody says, well, don't worry about it. But you can't do anything about it, right? Can't do anything about it. Also, anything that goes into space has to be accompanied. It has to have an escort. Do you guys know that? Something is often with it, right? Often. I think that's why Elon he's ripped, he's torn. Because imagine, right? If in order to go to space, you had to have authorization, not from world governments. No, not from that. You had to have permission by something else, or it would most certainly fail. You had to have a rite of passage to go into space, right? So even if a person had all the money in the world, it does not guarantee them that rite of passage. Now, if what I'm saying is true, if you have to have some sort of rite of passage, you have to have permission from people other than, the folks we deal with or have heard about, then that means every single individual who has successfully gone into space doesn't matter what the craft was, has also failed a few times, but the times they did not fail, they sought permission, which means they were indoctrinated into one of the elitist programs, kind of like the program at several ranches within the USA and Canada. And so they have a right to be there, right? So mission patches and names of ships and all that, it means something. It means a whole lot. Which means our Earth, the nature of space, is a bit different than the nature of our reality here to a degree, right? And the gag orders would be real. And it would be important to push certain paradigms because things don't follow physics as we know them. You'll also notice they only talk about things you can observe from the surface. So here it is. If you're standing outside, you look up into the Arizona sky in a part of the desert where no lights are, so you really get a good view. Or if you're in Alaska or somewhere like that, you start looking up, you'll see stuff all over the sky, stuff moving, jumping, and of course, the natural explanation is satellites. But what if it were you're seeing part of the real nature of space itself, which is by no means as empty as we think it is. Right? And it's kind of like in the daytime, you look up, what do you see? What do you see in the daytime? You may see the moon. You may see, Venus during its transit. You may see Jupiter. You may see Saturn, right? You may see Mars, depending on the light intensity coming from the surface of the Earth. You go to a spot on Earth where there are no light emissions or light pollution is down by a significant degree. You start to see everything up there. Satellites floating by, other things that you can't explain on a continuous basis. You begin to realize that space is governed. There's a different type of air traffic control taking place in space for good reason. Okay? You would also find out that because there is no empty spot in the sky you can actually look at, there'd be hardly, if no, discernment of constellations while you're out there. You would also see a host of, something that looks like, can you imagine seeing a piece of a pyramid? You know how the pyramids are, right? They're kind of broken down things. Imagine if you saw something similar to that in space. Well, that change your mind, wouldn't it? That would just mess you up, wouldn't it? If you were to actually look up and see possibly maybe a black pyramid that looked old and crusty out there in space, like it had been orbiting space for a long time, but it was indeed a pyramid, right? That'd mess you up, wouldn't it? Or if you looked up in the daytime and you started to see these pyramids, right? It kind of mess you up, wouldn't it? It shouldn't mess anybody up. It really should not. The problem is there are obvious things that are hidden, and they leave speculation in the eyes of the populace to come up with theories, what they could be. Based upon the information a person has on the surface of the Earth, there's no way a person can come up with the right answer because things are hidden, right? I mean, by the way, these ruins that we have in the Earth, all these rocks and formations, they're just, some sort of temple or something like that, right? But what if they were mirrored? And what I'm saying is space is clouded with our junk, first of all. Then we go out to the radiation belts, which all is part of Earth. It is. And it's junked up with a bunch of stuff, plus radiation. We go out a little bit more right when we hit the magnetosphere. Just in case you didn't know, the magnetosphere is way out there. It's way out there. And outside of it, the troubles are. The magnetosphere keeps everything inside of it pretty safe. It's like a shield, but not so much forget about radiation. Think of it as a natural shield that electromagnetic energy cannot just penetrate when it wants to. Which means if you could ever get close enough to look past the Van Allen belts without any distortion from space, you'd probably see everything you didn't want to see. Which is why you go find any picture of space, a picture they took in space. You're going to notice very deep, deep, deep blacks in that picture. You're going to notice that most of the stars are missing, except the ones that have been explained here on the surface of the Earth. You're going to notice small, subtle changes In other words, they've been scrubbed. Half the information on that picture, whatever it is, has been taken out. Taken out. In fact, they say a picture from an 11 or 10 pixel camera, right? Your average size of a 10 pixel camera, that picture's, it can't go over, 10 gigabytes, can it? It could if you were in space, because it'd be information on just about every single pixel. Imagine seeing that. It will be blinding, wouldn't it? Not as black as you think. Most people think, oh, it's dark and it's black and you hardly see anything. No, it isn't. It's not black. It's not some empty void either. It's full of stuff. But the atmospheres filter out certain types of light, right? Like the moon. Most people look at the moon from Earth and they say, well, the moon is lifeless. There's no color in the moon. The moon is full of color. Full of reds and full of greens and full of blues and purples and oranges, full of turquoise and more blue, right? Lots of these deep maroon colors. It's full of color. Phobos and Eros, the same thing. They look like some lit up, some art project is what they look like, with colors all over the place. They even share color patterns with those found inside some of the pyramids. Some of the etchings in the pyramids are indeed some of that stuff found out there. That's something, which means something has happened out there they really want to hide. I'll get in no trouble ever saying that. They want to hide something that has happened out in space. They want to hide it. They can't afford for anybody to see it. We're just talking about the first parts of space, leaving Earth, getting a good look at certain things they want to hide, what has happened in space. Do you know what would happen if people would see what happened in space? They'd throw their religion away. That's number one. You want to know a real argument and a real discussion that took place in the last 2 years? That if people really understood the nature, right, of all these extraordinary findings, they wouldn't have a religion. And you know what happens to the world without a central core belief in something, some religion? You know what happens? It's an area. It's not covered as part of a necessity. For people to operate, they have to have something to believe in. Thank God for you, Jesus of Nazareth. I could have been born in another country, right, worshiping something else. I could have been raised up something else, having to contend with some other religion that's worse than anything we can imagine, right? Very thankful I was not. Because to see something like that, which everybody will soon see, let's put it this way, some of the shielding that blocks out your perspective of space is going to be gone. Then when things were exposed, I'm not talking about any threats coming yet. I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about meteorites. I'm not talking about UFOs. I'm not talking about closed passages. I'm talking about people seeing what's been there this entire time. When they start to see it, they're going to have questions. Then it will begin to burn. Of course, there won't be too many questions after that. But for a brief period, people will see ruins orbiting this planet. Imagine that. Ruins. Like you see a Roman building up there or something like that. Those type of ruins, right? Things that look like they belong in a garden. Those type of ruins. Ruins. How'd they get up there? Because something happened out there. Something not far-fetched. Something very close to home, but it happened out there. And if it happened out there, evolution would be thrown out of the window. And if you throw evolution out, then people who know about evolution are going to start to doubt the foundation of their very existence. Why do you think it's so important they get people to watch these ghost shows? Because that's the alternative. They're already setting people up with an alternative to fall back on. Already. So they won't have to explain, but people can come up with some sort of a story themselves. And the folks who have knowledge of this are going to be the most frightened. But the atmospheres no longer do what they have long done, which is to filter out certain types of light. You guys are going to have lots of questions. There will be a shaking. Remember what we read yesterday? Everything will be shaken. So only that which cannot be shaken will stand. That's a necessary step as part of this closure at the end of these days. That's a very necessary step. Why? Because we hold things that aren't real very close to our hearts. We actually believe in things that are false. We do. We believe in things that are false, things that only God can remove from us. And all of us should realize by now that if we hold something we think is true and we have invested our time in it, we're going to fight to keep it true. And it will take God to prove us wrong on that issue. But at least we're going to be free. I need you guys to see that the Father exposing these things that we hold as true, when they're exposed as being a lie, we're going to be free of that perspective. Because we can often get ourselves locked into a mindset where we start to defend lies. Defending a lie. And until you have seen it with your own eyes, there's nothing you can say to somebody else. It doesn't matter what I've actually seen. There's nothing I can say to you that's going to sway your opinion enough to believe what I'm saying. Plus, I couldn't explain it in the first place. Neither could anybody else, not in detail, right? Realistic enough for you to envision. You can't envision something that you have no concept for. Let me give you an example. There are certain things that have shapes that will make you regurgitate just based on how it's shaped. So you have a circle, you have a cube, right? You have a parallelogram, all these different types of shapes. But imagine a shape that would make you sick to your stomach instantly. Imagine seeing a silhouette of something that is not living, right? It's not living. It just has a shape that will make your body, your blood run cold with fear. But it's not even alive. What would that be? What would you say that is? You couldn't say that's memory or you making something real by something that you're comparing it to. No. This would be memory on a very deep level, passed down from generation to generation. The warnings are going to return in that way. And let me just explain this to you. Your fathers, going all the way back, happen to be people who knew what happened during the flood. The flood was so terrible. Every civilization wrote about the flood. Every civilization. And they gave you descriptions of what happened during that flood. Right? But it was so devastating to them, all of what they saw and all of what they went through, that they built monuments and they etched in stone the stories. The problem is we have forgotten how to read iconography. And so when we're looking at ruins, we misinterpret what we're seeing and we put it together some other way. Kind of like what Egypt did for the sake of the loan that the UK gave them. They interpreted the hieroglyphs in a specific way that would capitalize on tourism. They didn't tell people the truth by their interpretation. So some of those interpretations are lies. Kind of like what the military found in 1997 and 1998. They went back after looking, right, at the Sumerian artifacts and tales. They found out that people, well, that too was tainted. Very tainted. The Sumerians were much like this civilization that we have right now, where people documented major historical happenings, and they did the same thing. They twisted the names around, twisted the story around. They did. And people believe the twisted version, and they will reject the truth every single time. That same thing came out with Saddam Hussein and Satan's seat. You guys remember Satan's seat? Where Satan's seat is? Remember that scripture in the Bible that talked about it? Well, Saddam Hussein actually had Satan's seat. And he's the one that actually put people in grinders and things of that nature. He did some horrific things. And he thought he could evoke. He thought he really could evoke the wisdom of Nebuchadnezzar upon himself, because he wanted to be that head of gold of the statue. Why did he want to do that? So that all the powers of his offspring would be inside of Saddam Hussein. So he was off his rocker. Or was he? He was dealing with spirits. And he wanted the power of those spirits. He's the one, him and Hitler were looking for King Solomon's ring. They were the ones looking for it. King Solomon's ring. And Hitler found a few things, like that big thing they found in China. They found something big. It was made out of iron that won't rust, mixed with aluminum. It was in the shape of a ball. It had 2 rooms on the inside. It was 250 feet. It had a 250-foot radius, but it was meant for one person and one person alone. That was back in World War II. That was part of a meditation chamber they found in the mountains. And it had been there for a very, very long time. They know this because part of the rock was embedded with the iron and with the aluminum. How do you get iron and aluminum to mix perfectly like that, yet still be separate as far as its construction? You can be the best TIG welder in the world. You're still not going to pull that one off like that because of the different melting points. And what about that iron around the world that refuses to rust? How can you leave iron out in the elements for all that time and there's no rust on it? We know about oxidation and the effects that take place due to the sun and acidic rains and rain period. But it doesn't affect that stuff. That was found in World War II. Right? You guys no doubt understand the lies the Russians told when they said they found Hitler and they had shot him. But the truth was, at least 100 people identified that it was not Hitler, but it was a well-known double. They even have the photographs. Russia has the photographs. Do you guys know that? Just lies that they tell. And this does what? This just exposes this false foundation that we have, living in this world that we've been so used to. And it's not even what we think it is. It's not what we think it is. But because all of us read it, we're more prone to believe it by a type mob mindset. You get enough people that believe in one thing, then to those people it becomes true. If that number grows, it becomes a fact in the minds of many. Period. Most things like that around the face of the earth are just like that. They're historical figures. All of you know of, but 2 of them are not real. They're not real. That was a made-up thing that happened in, I believe it was 1921, right around the Great Depression. 2 false figures were made up then. They're not real. All of you know them, but they're not real. They never existed. Space is kind of like that too. Again, we can observe space from the ground here. Most things are filtered out by the atmosphere, even at nighttime. When you get out into space, there is not a spot in space you can look at that's empty. Again, if you had a 10 megapixel camera and you took a photograph, every single pixel would have a dot in it or a host of dots. That's a lot of stuff. That's a lot of volume out there in space. It does not look anything like the movies. That's why they filter pictures. Remember the pictures they took of the Earth from the moon and how they spliced 2 individual pictures together, made one black and white, one in color. The moon is always in black and white. They always block out the shadows left by these big giant towers and everything else. We get around to 2020 and they start, they were putting out a certain type telescope. And during solar eclipses, you can capture details on the moon that you can catch at no other time. And while everybody was running to the eclipse, you had several people who were pointed right direct. They were looking at the moon and the moon only. And they picked up some pretty wild things, right? So as it turns out, one of the nut jobs, I thought it was a nut at first. I did. I have to admit it. There's a guy that came out, and I thought this guy was a Looney Tune. I honestly thought he had lost it. But he used to always talk about these big glass domes and radar dishes and all this stuff that was on the moon. I was like, this guy lost it, right? If that existed, somebody would have seen that with a telescope or something like that. But he wasn't. And those ruins match what's here on the surface of the earth. And right now we're in a very different time. We're in a time where things wake up. Things are both exposed and wake up. Remember what the Lord said, that all these secrets, all these things that were secret, they're not going to be secret. They won't. They're going to be fully disclosed. He even said that most of these secrets that men keep, they would keep until a specific time. Then they'd open them up. They want maximum impact from these things. Because when you begin to learn about these things and all of it's known, it's going to blow you away. It's going to mess you up. It's going to blow you away. Because the truth is, not one person is prepared to really receive what's going to be disclosed. It's kind of like this UFO disclosure thing. You know how everybody's saying they're disclosing UFOs? No, they're putting the UFO thing out there because they got something else they want to disclose, and it's not the UFO. Let me try to turn it into a ratio. The UFO disclosure seems like it's going to be a big deal, right? It won't, but they need people to be comfortable with that, so that the other disclosure won't kill them while they're standing on their feet. How about that? There's another level to this UFO thing nobody has discussed, and they will not discuss it, but it's about to be disclosed. And it's important that they gauge the public with this UFO thing to see how much of a fanatic people are really going to be, right? How many false things are going to be made up? Because these guys know the truth about what they have discovered. They know the truth. We don't know the truth, right? So they know the truth. They leak out a few things. People start adding their 2 cents. Then they come up with this story. The one thing they don't want is for people who are, if you're at a time, right, where you're prone to believe in fanciful things, naturally you spread a lie. Disney established that. But when you're at a time where you're able to handle something much bigger, right, you never add to what's been put out there because it's no longer a big deal to you. So long as people keep adding lies to this UFO topic, right? Adding all this scientific complexity. They have no science of UFOs. Kind of like a person. Have you guys ever heard of an expert on spirits? You ever heard of that? You know how people get on TV? Most of you people should be familiar with this by now. They get on television. They get on these shows. They get in books. They get on interviews. They get all over the place. They start explaining how ghosts work, how spirits work. They always say the same thing. Well, in order for a spirit to move an object, it takes a lot of energy. They say that over and over and over and over again, don't they? They say it takes a lot of energy. Now, let me ask you something. The people on television say that, causing everybody else to believe it. But why are all of them saying it when they don't even like each other? And all of them say the same thing. Well, it takes a lot of energy for a spirit to move something. They keep saying that term over and over. Of all the stuff they spew, that one fact they need you to believe. Why? Why would they need anybody to believe that it takes an enormous amount of energy for a spirit to move anything in our reality? Why? Doesn't that decrease spiritual abilities and give a person greater comfort in that small little morsel of a design statement. So people are going to start, when you hear people take comfort in that term, folks, they're going to a new level. And here's their comfort. They'll say, well, spirits don't have that much. They can't harness that much energy. They have to take their energy from stuff that we make. And if they can't get it, they can't manifest. It's important that they have everybody believe that big lie. Why? So that you're not fearful, nor will you watch of the true things of what people call the spiritual realm. What you may not know is this. You think everything you see is in reality wrong. Everything you see is subject to change based upon a spiritual decision. This is the manipulated world, the product of the spiritual world, period. Period. So the spiritual realm, right? Based on what they decree, what they do, whatever that is, we have this reality. That's based in the spiritual realm. That's where it begins. That's where it starts. So any happening that happens in reality, it begins, it originates in the spiritual realm, and it's not the other way around. It begins over there first, then it comes into here, right? Now keep that in mind as we drift further away from the planet, because I think it's important you guys understand this, because if a small meteorite, if we go through a meteor storm, you think that the fires on the surface of the earth could be the worst that you're going to face? That's wrong. That's wrong. They've already been through that before, and they know exactly what happens. And everybody in those places were casualties, not of fire, but of something else. But if you don't understand the nature of this reality, and I'll say what it can potentially be, and the spiritual power exercised over it, you might lose your wits about you. Because confrontations will also come. You're not going to have space-bound issues being free of spiritual problems. Any space-bound issue is going to invite a host of new spiritual problems. They'll always go hand in hand. That's why you had astronauts go up there under vows and they would come back praying. Not because of re-entry. It was always in post reviews they would find out about certain things from these astronauts. Astronauts' lives were changed coming back to this planet. And also they had no interest in going back out there again. That's the funny part, the small fact overlooked. Because they would talk about going out there again. Those who went far enough, they would talk about them going back out there. And you could see it in their eyes. It was almost like they were scared to death to go back. Why? They don't want to be that close again. That's why. They don't want to be that close to having no protection. They just don't. They didn't. They try to warn people. People won't listen to the astronauts that went up there first. Not the ones at the ISS, the ones that went further. It was to the point where people thought it important to make up this tale saying nobody ever went to the moon. That's very important also. Because if nobody went to the moon, they didn't even get that close, which means nobody ever saw anything, which means any story they would have told based upon what they would have seen that far out, nobody would have believed. Do you see that? So the true fact is they don't want anybody to know what anybody encountered that close to something else. The moon is like the barrier. It's like the barrier. It rides the veil, you could say. The moon rides the veil. We get that term. I'll say it one more time. The moon rides the veil, the real veil. It rides it. So if you get close to the moon, or you're sitting right there on the moon, you're bound to see more than what you want to see, right? Much more. And when you learn about the capabilities, it almost takes all your hope away. All of it. That's why people's hearts are going to fail them for fear. Because it's not a mystery to quite a few people. And it's a blessing that many people, you guys don't know about it yet. Unfortunately, all of you are going to know about it shortly. Every single last one of you are going to know about it shortly. You'll know about it. And it's really going to be a crucible of your faith in Christ. Those who are just playing like they have faith in Christ, they're going to crack. No matter how tough they are or anything else, they're going to crack. One person put it, they said they would rather die 1,000 times from the most brutal death anybody can imagine than to face certain things again. How can something be worse than death and anguish? Right? The Bible did not say people would kill themselves because they were scared. That's not what it says. It says their hearts would fail them. Wasn't it Armstrong that said death, there's no escape in death? He said there's no escape in death because he understands what's there. Lord have mercy. And people would like to believe that empty, the empty version, like just some sort of rock is going to crash into the earth, a fire pops up, and we put the fire out, some people die, and that's the end of that. That's what people would just love to be true. But it's not. I'm going to take a break. I'll be right back. Right back. And when I come back, I'm going to take a short pause. We got to go out further than the moon because there are some expectations you might want to be aware of. Listen, you guys are going to entertain some things that the nature of things you may not have, you may not have thought about. And if you're steeped in what men have told you and you're bound to that and that's it, you're going to have an issue, a problem. It's going to be very, very sad for you. Right? If we have faith, we're not going to worry ourselves about being experts on something we cannot ever observe directly, but to understand that by way of the word of God, we're going to face some things we might want to get ready for it. Right? According to what the Lord gave us, because he already told us why he gave us prophecy. He already told us why he gave us prophecy. Right? When I come back, I'm going to take some questions and move on to this topic. We got to hurry, too. I'll be right back in just a few minutes, everybody, right here at COT. Now, I want to make this for the record, too. I want you guys to know something. This is not just to fill up airways, okay? That's not what this is for. That is not what this is for. Have you guys ever seen a person walk up on a wild animal? And you didn't really expect to walk up on a wild animal that could really hurt you. Did you guys ever see that? Has anybody ever gone through that? There have been so many cases where people thought they would never encounter a mountain lion or something of that nature. And they did. And they were indeed hurt by that animal. And it was a surprise to them, right? But I've also seen people who were aware those animals were around and they were listening. The animal didn't come up on them unaware. They could spot the animal a distance off and they would tell everybody, let's go that way. Well, they'd say, why? because I think there's something over there moving. And everybody would say, why? And this is just follow me. And then when they get out of the way, then they look through a scope or something in that direction and see a very dangerous animal. That's the difference. When you know, when you're aware of your surroundings, you can put your head in the sand and say, well, I don't want to know about any of it. But I hate to tell everybody this. You put your head in the sand willfully. The Bible says being willfully ignorant of the truth, as some people are, right? Willfully ignorant means you know, but you don't want to deal with it. You just want the good story. Don't give me the whole story. Just give me the piece of it. You're not going to be prepared when something catches you off guard. You know what happens? You're not really standing on faith anymore. You're acting out of fear. God did not give us the spirit of fear, did he? So that means the spirit of fear is going to be the opposite of standing on faith. When you're standing on faith, you have a natural tendency to watch out for everybody else who is not aware. You do what's in their best interest. You get them to safety. You'll do whatever you can do to get them to safety. You become an active worker for other folks around you. Now, if you're not aware yourself, you're going to be caught in a moment of fear. You're going to act out of desperation, risking lives. That's what you'll do. It happens every day to people, every day on planet Earth. It happens. You ever see a person go too fast in a car? You tell them to slow down, right? They don't slow down. Oh, I've done this lots of times, and then bang, they're in a car accident. I thank God I have never harmed anybody with a vehicle. I have never hit anybody's vehicle with a vehicle. Do you know why? Because I'm extra cautious. I'm going to be aware of my surroundings because the Bible says, be as wise as serpents, as harmless as doves. A serpent by way of heat knows, and by way of smell, they know everything around them. Serpents are around people all the time, but people rarely see serpents. You know that? They know where you are. You don't know where they are. That's why so many exist. Because they know where you are. You don't know where they are. If you're as wise as a serpent, you're going to know your surroundings and your environment, that nothing come upon you unawares. In fact, isn't that what Jesus emphasized? Don't let that day come upon you unawares. Don't let him come like a thief in the night into your situation. A thief in the night coming into your house, that means you weren't even watching. You were not on watch. You couldn't warn anybody. That thief took you by surprise. Right? In order for something to not catch you by surprise, you have to be aware of your surroundings, regardless of what it is. If your father put you here on this earth, he equipped you to live. Do you hear me? He equipped you to live, not to die, to live. You know what that means? It means you have a function, you have a purpose, you have a responsibility. That turns into duty. And when you do that duty, you're an honorable person in the kingdom. You bury your head in the sand, you're going to stagnate your circumstances. You're going to barely make it through. You'll never become what you're supposed to become, and you don't need to be that way. You're meant for so much more. Do you know that? You're meant for so much more. But the sad part is, you have the steering wheel. You do. You can see every sign on the road, but it's up to you to take an exit or not. Wouldn't it be nice to know where you're going? How many of you would take a trip and you don't know where you're going? You'd have no destination, would you? If you have no idea where you're going, no idea where you're headed, you have no destination. You're just driving. And if you're just driving, you began something without purpose. Our Father does not work that way. Everything he does has a very high purpose. Your life has a high purpose. But how many of you would deny that purpose by putting your head in the sand? See, the world offers you the jelly bean story. You know what that is? It's like candy. It looks appealing and all that good stuff, right? It tastes sweet. You don't know what comes of that. They've not educated you at the ending of that. But we've seen the ending of what happens when you live by the world's standards. You get caught in a meat grinder. Living by the world's standards and accepting all they say, living by what man declares, right? It's like giving yourself up to Satan prematurely. walking in the enemy's camp, just roaming around. You have no belief, no major purpose, no anything. You just go with the flow as it comes. God didn't put you here for that. All of us are to carry something. Now, if God wants you to carry the gospel, which he does, right? Then where are the people who need the gospel? Where are they at? I'll tell you where they're at. They're in the clutches of the enemy. How does the enemy have them? Like he had most of us. Having us believing in a fairy tale, when reality, right? Reality was what we really needed to see, but we didn't see reality. We saw the fairy tale, and we wasted our time chasing after a fairy tale, only to wake up and realize we should not have gone that deep into it. How many of you have wasted years of your life looking for a fairy tale? And now you know by the principles of Christ and by the Lord's word that you probably should not have gone in that direction. But that's a clear indication of what the world gives you, what it offers you. Think of it this way, presidential elections. We've had a lot, right? In every single presidential election, there are promises. We're going to do this and we're going to do that. We're going to do this. Now listen to me carefully. Each president pumps people up and tells them what they're going to do. And people sit back and say, yeah, I'm voting for that guy. He's finally going to do what we want him to do. Right? Everybody does that. From Clinton to Obama to Trump to Biden. Everybody does it. Everybody sat back and poked their chest out saying, yeah, now we have it. Now we're going to get this thing running like we want it. Something always happens, doesn't it? The next guy always tears down the work of the other guy. No matter what good he did is torn down and starts back up again with the same promises that we keep falling for. We get excited because that guy said something and we start trusting his word by weight of the evidence they put before you. That's how Satan fools people. That's how he fooled Eve, by weight of the evidence. See, God told Eve something she should have kept by faith. But then the devil basically said, prove it. Let me prove to you. Let me give you the logistics. Let me give you the details on what God was saying. And that's how Eve slipped up and fell. She could not follow the directive God gave her. That simple directive. No, Satan had to communicate the facts. Well, God knows when you eat of this tree, you're going to be like he is, knowing good from evil. Was that a truth or a lie? That was the truth. So Satan gave her the truth. But he gave her details, and he made her covet. He made her appetite increase for that tree, saying, oh, it's good for food. It's pleasant to the eye. She was not saying that until she talked to Satan. The fairy tale. That's what happens with all these deep explanations of spiritual things. That's what Satan did to Eve. God said, don't eat of that tree, and the day you do, you're going to die. What does Satan do? Well, at first he challenged God. He said, well, did God say you can't eat of, all these trees? Eve said, oh, no, he didn't say that. You know how us humans are. We want to correct somebody. Oh, he didn't say that. He said we can eat of all the trees except for that one. He says, oh, you know why he said that? That's where Satan gives you the deeper knowledge. Well, let me tell you why he said that. The reason he said that is because in the day you do, you're going to be like he is, knowing good from evil. That's exactly what Satan did. That's exactly what Satan does. And once you start pondering the details, you start putting together a picture that is not your father's. And it will lead you into what? Into rebellion. Into a fall every single time. In fact, Satan didn't stop at the garden. He's been doing the same thing ever since. Throughout the Bible, there's example after example after example. Every time somebody was duped by going for that deeper knowledge. See, here's the problem. Why would a person want deeper knowledge when they cannot simply use the directives they have right now? Jesus said, I'm going to paraphrase. Jesus was saying that we know things to do, we won't even do them, and then we go look for something deeper. Like we want to obey that, have knowledge of that deep thing when we can't even obey the shallow things. See how Satan does? That's what he does. That's what's happening in the world right now. Because of rebellion, people say, show me, give me something deeper, and I'll believe you. And then somebody else comes in, give me something deeper, and I'll believe you. And then somebody else comes along, give me something deeper. And Satan will guide a person straight to their death through this method. It works every single time. You don't believe me? Why would a person have to hear the single gospel of Jesus Christ from 15,000 people in order to consider it? Something is wrong with that, isn't it? Because the truth is, we heard it the first time. We just wanted someone to word it how we wanted it, so we could live our lives like we wanted, with a clear conscience, like we're somehow obeying God, but still living in adultery, living with fornication and all the other stuff. We need someone to agree with us in our error, and we can only get that through deepness, so we start mixing stuff together. Take a fact from that guy, and a fact from this guy, and a fact from the other guy, and before you know it, you get a whole story, and you can live your life the way you want to. That's exactly what Satan wants you to do. Live your life the way you want to. Isn't that the world's message? Go live your life the way you want to. Be the king of your own castle. Have it your way. Every single ad line. Emphasize it. Have it your way. Get it customized. I mean, they really amplify this thing until it's deeply embedded in your mindset. And when it comes to God's simplicity, we say, well, I want to obey it, but nobody else is doing it. So give me something deeper so I can go around it. Right? So somebody can change what God said so we don't have to obey it. That's exactly what Satan does. And why do you think there's a remnant left at the end and the whole is gone? You're part of a remnant. You're part of what's left over. You're a piece of a whole that used to exist, and it does not exist anymore because people are falling like flies. When these special, extraordinary events take place on the earth, even more people are going to fall like flies because they're going to see something they never ever thought they could ever see. They're not even imagining right now what they're going to see. People are still stuck on UFOs. They can't even get past that point. They're going to see something far more fantastic than that. And when they see that, their faith is going to go out the window. They're going to be overwhelmed with proof of something else, with whatever they want. And the message will be, live like you want to. Is that what the beast says? Live like you want to. That's why sin was rampant all over the earth in the book of Revelation. Live like you want to. You don't have to do it God's way. Even right now, how many Christians will tell you to keep praying? How many Christians will say, if you really want to know, then go pray? That's not what they're saying, is it? They said, well, I'll tell you what, if you really want to know, call me at 8 o'clock. I'm going to tell you all about it. Wrong, wrong, wrong. That's how Satan dupes people. Now, if a person says, you go pray, you receive what the Lord gives you spiritually, then that person who instructed you, guess what? They trust in the Lord too. See, I trust in the Lord. He will give you your ultimate truth. A man will not. That's why you should read your own Bible. Let the Lord speak to you intimately. Don't go to people to get your truth. Let people complement the truth God gave you. But don't let people give you your truth. But see, that's not what the message is it? You don't think Satan is real? He's hiding in error. He's the one that will capture your ear and give you everything you want to hear so you can circumvent obedience. He's a bedazzler and enchanter. Eve was enchanted. She was beguiled, enchanted. And once a thought is planted, Saul, she wrote. Some of these extra biblical texts have done even worse to people. You remember in the Bible it was talking about useless genealogies? Don't get caught up in the useless genealogies. Where somebody came from, the bloodline and all this, that, and the other. Remember it said Jewish fables? Remember God said people would return to fables again. Remember that? He does the same thing from the beginning of his time with humanity to this very day. He's been doing the same thing. Let me give you this small insight. You ready? If you don't get your truth by way of prayer through Christ Jesus, you don't have the truth. You do not have it. You just have a bunch of words. That's all you have. Haven't you noticed that Satan is trying to tell everybody that truth comes from mankind? Remember that? Remember what I just said? That's what Satan says. Truth comes from mankind. In other words, he's always going to let you know that mankind has it. Jesus will never say that. He never said that. Your father never said that. Remember that. Because the penalties are real for those who will stay beguiled. The only way a person can stay beguiled is if they want to. Because anybody who wants to break free, they're granted that right now through Christ and Christ only. There's an element among mankind cannot see. And those who can see it among mankind will hide it to the very last day, so that you never, ever have any evidence to the contrary. And when it is all seen, that's when it's going to be too late. And that major trouble is coming from both below and above. You guys remember when Gabriel was withstood 21 days? So he comes from the throne of God to earth to be withstood. And Michael had to help him break through to get to Gabriel, or to get to Daniel. Something was holding him back. Like a bubble is around the earth. Satan is the prince of the air, correct? Do you all know this? Satan is the prince of the air. Satan is the prince of this world. You know him by those titles. Maybe that's why they have Apollo written on most craft. Maybe that's why all your Boeing aircraft have the exact same incantation on them. And believe me, it's not some godly term. Maybe that's why all fighter jets have a prayer connected in the imagery of that craft. Did you know that? Another incantation. Maybe that's why no spacecraft will ever be launched from Earth without a ring of incantations. Because they know they'll fail. If they don't, they'll have no permission. So Gabriel had to break through something. Mankind seeks permission from it to maximize of it. And for the most part, we deny it because we don't know about it. It remains unseen to most of us because we choose to ignore it. But if you choose to ignore that Satan is the prince of the air, and the air, by the way, was a term spoken of as a controller or influence of man's mind. Did you know that? So what's in the air can influence man's mind. His mind is influenced by what's in the air. But if you deny anything is in the air, you'll assume all of your thoughts come from you, which they don't. You'll never rebuke your own thoughts if you think you originated them. So you'll accommodate external forces in your own mind. And after you ponder them for a while, they often fall into your heart. Then your heart fills up and they come out of your mouth. That's how you speak. What you speak of is what you're full of. Please remember that about Satan, because he's not going to stop until he's locked away. And as soon as he's unlocked, after the 1,000-year reign, he's going to go out and deceive men again on the earth. So by way of his very nature, he deceives. He is the author of confusion. You know what confusion is? That means there's no singleness. You know, when Jesus talked about the I being single, anybody know what that means spiritually? I'll give you a hint. That same thing he spoke is echoed in the Old Testament. But it went further, talking about singleness of vision. Being one authority, and everything aligns with that one authority, so that all elements are seeing the same thing. So if your I be single, then you've submitted yourself and you function by your submission, which is to Christ. That means you're not going to serve Christ 1 hour and Satan the next. But if you're seeing something else and seeing the truth at the same time, Satan enters in. Did you know that? Having your eyes single means you see the truth and are willing to obey it. That's one perspective. But if you see something else, you're not seeing with singleness, you're seeing two things. Now you have to contemplate two things. That means you're looking left and looking right, two different directions. That means there's a big gap in between and something enters in. Then you struggle and fight to choose which is which, and you begin to doubt both. That's called confusion, and Satan is the author of confusion. If Satan is the author of confusion, then what's the opposite of confusion? Clarity. That's what comes from the throne of God, is clarity. God gives very clear things. That's why he said something. There are attributes in the Bible about wisdom from above. Wisdom from above are connected to the fruits of the Spirit. Wisdom above is pure, peaceful, gentle, easy to be entreated, full of mercy, good fruits, without partiality, without hypocrisy. The fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, and temperance. They go hand in hand. That's what comes from above. There's no argument in them. It's not torn knowledge. It is comforting knowledge, spiritual food for your souls, right? Nothing for your brain, nothing for your mind. The mind is part of the flesh, and that's why the Bible says the carnal mind is enmity against God. The carnal mind is against God. What's the opposite of a carnal mind? You ready? The mind of Christ. There is no other mind involved. So there's either your earthborn mind or the mind, the spiritual mind, which is the mind of Christ, of that new creature in Christ. Why is a new creature? Why is it necessary for you to be a new creature in Christ? Because the old creature is the old man with the old concepts, with that carnal mind, full of carnality, natural things given to you, your common sense, because you are to have something greater than common sense. Common sense is nothing to brag at. The foolish have common sense. A thief has common sense. A criminal has common sense. But who would have the mind of Christ? And what did the Lord say? If you obey my commandments, I and the Father will make our abode with you and will sup with you. You know what that means? That means you're well positioned in him, and it is well with your soul. That's what that means. So it's not even a factor following somebody who's right and disagreeing with somebody who's wrong. No, it's about you pointed towards Christ, being submissive towards Christ. That's what that's about. Don't let, whether it come from me or anybody else, don't let your truth come from flesh. I can only compliment what God has given you. You know what God has given you because you were born with it. Whatever God gave you, he gave you in the beginning. He's already given it to you. Now, if you remember that, you won't be fooled. But if you learn something by weight of the evidence presented to you, be careful, because that's exactly how Eve was beguiled. That's exactly what she followed. And she fell as a consequence of that. God has given you discernment likewise. The truth can always be confirmed. If it's something else, you have to be convinced. Remember that. Because when mankind's covers are taken off and the pillowcase is gone and nothing is comfortable anymore and they're forced to face a truth, many will bow to it. They're going to bow to it because they're going to find it's much more powerful than they. They're going to submit to it to save their own skins. And I'll go ahead and tell you right now, if people get in distress on earth without the Antichrist, and they're ready to sin to make that distress go away, what do you think the average person is going to do when they're in mortal distress? What do you think they're going to do? People will do that now. They'll compromise now. And it's not even a threat to their life. What do you think they're going to do when it's a threat to their life? If they'll do it under minimal stress, you know they're going to do it under maximum stress. But if you're aware of your surroundings, and if you stop ignoring but trusting what the Lord has already given you, and you really have to, you weigh that, right? Because there are certain things I know of that exist, but no one ever taught them to me. No one ever told me it, nor did I see it in a book. Only later on did I discover it did exist, and then I was mad because I said I should have stayed with I knew that was that way. I just inherently knew that, and I was convinced into believing it a different way. And I shouldn't have done that. Out there above your head is full of entities. Do you know that? Not only here in the earth, but out there too. Full of the wrong stuff, and it's coming. There are many people in the earth who say they communicate with UFOs. They say the exact same thing, but they're saying the people who are coming are going to help humanity. They're going to help them be enlightened. Do you know what that is? You know what that's a mockery. When Jesus said when he comes, those who are alive are going to be changed in a twinkling of an eye, that's a mockery to that statement. That's telling everybody else they don't have to wait on Christ, because when the other ones come, they're going to enlighten us their way. That's what it's doing. That's what it's planting in the minds of so many. And everyone who's willing to believe that is going to be shown evidence by these entities. So they're going to have their contact, their close proximity with these entities. And to them, it's going to be real. Do you hear me? To them, it's going to be, if you're willing to believe it, to you, it's going to be real. See, I'm not willing to believe that. I'm only willing to believe in my Messiah. I have no belief in anything else. A person asked me today, don't you believe in me? I said, no way. I love you. I'm not going to believe in you because what I believe in, I depend on. And what I depend on cannot be found here on this earth, but only at the right hand of the Father. Oh, it's coming all right. And they will track it. It's going to come. A full manifestation. And all who don't love the truth will be given over to it. All who don't love the truth are going to be given over to it. But if you love the truth, and that truth comes from Christ Jesus, if you love his truth, guess what? You'll not believe. You'll not be given over to a strong delusion that you would believe a lie. You won't. But if you do not love the Lord's truth, you will be given over to a strong delusion. You will believe a lie, and you will ultimately be damned. Somebody asked me one time, how exactly is God going to separate the wheat and the tare? He tells us in that scripture, because that's backed in the Proverbs and in the Psalms and in the Old Testament and in the New. By the way, if God sends a strong delusion, those given over to it will not escape. They'll not escape. But prior to that time, he did request of us some things, didn't he? He did. Before these other things breach, because they're going to breach. And so, you know what? There's going to come a day they're going to start talking about storms, but they're going to call them red storms. When the red storms come, the safest place to be during that time is going to be underground, not above ground. Anybody ever been in the Middle East in a sandstorm? I was in a sandstorm one day. First time I found out about a sandstorm of that nature, right? We had these shower places where they were set up where you could take a shower. And so it was a big water bag, right? Set up. And of course the water would come down and go all over you. Well, I didn't know a sandstorm was coming. Well, the end of that story is about 15 minutes later, I looked like a human mud puddle. The sand just stuck all over me, right? You can't just dry that off. You can't dry it off. It looked like I had a thick uniform on. That's what it looked like. It's covered in sand. I mean, it's sandblasted. The wood, right? The shower stall, everything. It's sandblasted, everything. The vehicles were getting sandblasted. This is when we found out we've got to change the cart paint on some of those, the brand new Hummers that we had in there, all right, that were reinforced. We had to change the paint, needed some alterations. That sand was just taking it off. And so they came up with a different process and sent them all back to the desert again because it took it down to the bare metal. And to do that to cart paint is some pretty rough stuff because everything was sandblasted. Over here in the USA, they're going to talk about red storms, and the red storms are not going to contain water. It will contain red crystalline sand that will go across anything just like sandpaper. It will begin to accumulate over here. I mean, you just mark my words. And people are going to say, what is this red, this muddy reddish rain? What is this? It will accumulate, crystallize. It's going to become a problem. We'll go through a couple of ejection events because a lot of that stuff is inside the earth also. So we're going to get hit from below and above. Somebody answer this. When's the last time we had an underground nuclear test? Anybody know? When's the last time we had one of those? You know what they found out through a nuclear underground test that happened in China one time? You know what they found out? That event, the event that went off with the yield it had, right? Had it not been for something right off Catalina Island, down in the ocean, it's man-made. It's not some aliens or something, but it's man-made. Had it not been for a type of buffering effect, California would have broken already. So they found out through these underground nuclear tests that was severely destabilizing the plates, right? So for a while, they put that at ease, and then North Korea started doing, you guys remember the underground tests of North Korea? And everybody was like, don't do that, don't do that. Because they get up to a larger yield, we're going to have natural fault slips just go off. Things will start to going off. So I'm telling you to tell you this, that a nuclear underwater test can absolutely cause a fault line to falter. Do you hear me? That means a catastrophe can begin from an underground nuclear test. It shifted things. The last one we had, that was big, that came from China, the one specifically in China, shifted things so out of proportion, right? They had a few emergency meetings. They had emergency talks and everything else, and they found out how far it spanned. They traced those sound waves that took some very irregular patterns, right? Which gave them a depth and everything else they needed to know of what it would take to cause a fault line to go. What I'm telling you right now is that if China developed a nuclear weapon of minimal yield, or we're going to say minimum yield, that can cause a fault line, if they do it in China, it could cause a fault line in the USA to totally give out. And we got a brand new plate with a brand new set of issues on that plate right now, don't we? And this is part of the war that's been fought right now. Do you all know that? Sometimes, if you're not careful, you start linking threats to what somebody else has hyped up. Well, I'm telling you right now, one of the greatest threats any country would have against another country is an underground nuclear test, because it can cause a chain reaction, and it can also be directional. See how that is, guys? Which means a lot of people say, well, there are people in power, they want the population to go down. So here it is. We already know we're headed into a very dangerous part of space. Things will impact the oceans. Big things are going to impact the oceans. If an evil person wanted everybody to believe that something was a natural disaster, even the scientists, the opportune time to do something like that, to have an underground nuclear test that could not be traced, is to wait for some minimal impact of something from space, whether it be the space station or a space module or anything like that. And then to set that off at that time, which sends directional sound waves out. Would that be the opportune time to do that? Of course it would. And with some of the microwave weapons that they have out right now, that some people complained up and some people have actually tracked and saw, there are folks with certain special tanks they've built at home. If they can see microwaves passing through it from like a beam going through it. Takes a lot of dry ice. Anyway, they track this. With that, they can affect people's minds. Do you know that? You know what happens if you're hit by a minimal microwave beam? It feels like your body's on fire, but nothing is burning. It can cause it can do the opposite of what a B12 complex can do. It can cause a mental fog. It can cause you to feel desperate. It can cause you to feel anxious. One of the side effects to any microwave is swelling of the fluids in your bodies. Did you know that? Because it causes an instant pressure difference between the outside of your skin and the inside. Well, that equates to swelling. Just in case you didn't know that. The sun does this all the time. It's been doing it more and more lately. And people are going to feel the effects of the sun like this more and more as we enter into a very volatile portion of space. Get ready for sky-based explosions. Get ready for the conversation they're about to have. You know what the conversation is going to be? Either by war or by inbound objects that we're going to have an example of here very, very soon. I'm not talking months. We're going to have an example. When something explodes like that in space, satellites are taken out, people will ask the question, what happens if one of those takes out maybe 5 or 6 satellites? But it doesn't actually destroy them. It causes them to go out of orbit and they hit another satellite, and then so on and so on. You'll see that play out on television. You'll see that scenario. Then and only then will they actually discuss what's on board with these satellites, what's been powering them for so long. That will lead back to some of the corporations that utilize these systems, about the size of one ammo can. Anyway, folks, you have a little small smidget of a platform into something we'll go very deep into. Now, oh, by the way, each part of what we talked about here tonight concerning space, concerning the sun, concerning the moon, is actually part of the KD files. The KD files go into depth, a little more into depth. They're more observations than anything else. It's not leading you anywhere, right? It just expands. And in those KD files are scenarios that each and every single one of you will see. Don't let them frighten you. Don't let them frighten you. We're about to go to war. We are. We're about to go to war, but the nature of this war is going to be very different than you think. The cyber side of this war is going to be the most devastating factor. That's before the missiles start flying, because somebody, we're just now trying out Iron Dome. You guys know this, right? So the U.S. has Iron Dome in place. Do you guys know this? So in effect, Iron Dome is deployed in the U.S. We already have net coverage. And believe it or not, I believe they're naming it Skynet. I've heard that somewhere before. Anyway, we have net coverage, which means we have interceptors, right? Lying on the east and west coasts. In this case, more on the east coast than anywhere else to intersect or kind of shoot down dangerous objects that may come our way. More and more countries like North Korea are demonstrating that they're willing, right, to do what's necessary to make a point. Places like Iran, whose countries are it looks like they're beginning to falter on the top side. What you may not know is that they have, through what has happened in the streets, they have rallied their forces into one cause, under one umbrella, and other nations are joining. Do you guys know this? Because of what happens in one of these nations, you have it's almost like a rallying call where many different people from many different nations are hearing that call to rally together and to begin to do something. Even ISIS is pledging to help someone. And you guys know how not good they are, right? That's not a place. By the way, the UK, do you guys know about ISIS in the UK? Well, let me put it this way. If anybody in the UK ever gets tangled with ISIS, right, they have a kill net that spans the USA, the UK, Canada. They can put your name on a list, and those folks will hunt you down and get you. They have them in all those countries, and not too many people are aware of this. That's fought every single day. That's something that is not usually discussed. In fact, they think it irresponsible to discuss on any large forum. I sort of agree with that. But you have a lot of people who they don't understand what they're getting involved with. The ISIS community has grown all over the world, and they can put your name down on a central list and you will be hunted. Normally it happens within 3 days. 3 days of anybody's name being actually stuck on that list. In their religion, it is an honorable act, right? And a directive from God himself to get that person who would dare defame Islam itself. That's also going to be seen, and that's a scary proposition, isn't it? Very scary. I'm telling you that to let you know that there are certain things that have gotten out of control. in the last 4 years. But you guys have not been touched, yet many have. You should be very thankful. Just because you don't know about something does not mean it cannot touch you. It won't hurt you. I'll tell you this right now. The reason you are sustained is because of your Father in heaven. That's why you're sustained. That's why. Remember that. Folks, I'm not going to jibble jabble too long. All right. Remember that. Remember these things, what we said. We will revisit those on Wednesdays. I think we're going to make Wednesdays Katie Day. What do you guys think about that? You guys think, okay, listen, here's what I'm going to do since it is 9:43. I'm going to take one more break, come back and answer some questions. All right. Not everybody. Everybody may not have some questions. And I also want to tell you guys our direction here at COT. I want to keep you guys informed as to where we're going. These are going to be very important days for us for COT. Very important. And I want everything on record. Right? So you guys be like my record keepers. How about that? I'll be back in just a few minutes right here at the Council of Time for your questions. So get them ready and I'll do my best to answer them. I'll be right back. Here we go. I'm back now. Okay, there we are. All right, guys, before I'll leap out of here, we'll get an update on Angela. I'll try to get an update here right after this broadcast shortly. Actually, I try to get one. I didn't get a response yet, but we'll see. We'll certainly see. Yeah, by the way, I think I'm going to put Wednesday in perspective with a few events, biblical events that were spoken about in the Old Testament that are not really covered too much. Right? Somebody says, question for Michael, with the upcoming Planet X, the entities of old that are more evil, more brutal than anyone can ever. Is this true? The fallen were bound. I mean, the fallen were bound. They were stripped of their abilities, right? Stripped of their abilities, they had to resort to building things like we do. They still have extraordinary knowledge sets, right? They know a lot. But they're more or less bound to technology similar to ours, right? And for example, something about technology. Do you guys know there's a set of minerals that they're rare, of course, but they're in the earth that have, I guess you could say, anti-gravity properties. Do you guys know that? It's a mineral in the earth that was abundant, they say, maybe 4,000 years ago, something like that. They have anti-gravity properties, right? So somehow they interact based on temperature with repelling, kind of like the opposite of gravity, repelling, but it's just a mineral. So naturally, they probably had access to all this and did a few things with it. All right. So that could answer a lot of questions about some of the mystique. Other things are because they are smart and do deal with things, think of our scientists at CERN who have been working on things, and, there are people who have successfully, caused things to disappear, whatever you want to call it, go into another dimension and come back. They would have expertise in that area, right? So it's probably why you see that most people who are experts in technology also have a lot of esoteric ideologies, right? They do a lot of esoteric ideologies. And every single last one of them was in contact with some sort of entity, from Microsoft to Apple, right? Even the iPhone that you hold in your hands was developed after long meditation. The iPod was too, after being in the in another realm, or escorted to another realm, right? So they being stripped, they're probably all over the place. A lot of them are bound here on Earth. Some are chained in the earth, some are not. I believe that a lot of what people are seeing are not from other planets, right? But are these bound entities. I do know one thing for a fact. They're very old. Very old. I mean, very old. Extremely old. Okay, let me get to, I'm going to flip back and forth here, guys. Let me go to Mixler and see what we got here. Let's see, question. Now, if I miss your question, guys, it's because you guys are going fast. Somebody says, how do you know the earth is round? I know by observation. If you've been up past, I'd say 125,000 feet, right? That's the only way to really answer that, right? I don't get into the round square things because that's a useless argument that normally separates those who believe in Christ. And it has no bearing on salvation. Even if the earth was triangle, right? It's not going to excel or stop somebody's salvation. It won't do that. So sometimes arguments and these suggestions come to cause some sort of and people do sit back and laugh at them. Because that has no bearing on the cross. None whatsoever. It doesn't even matter. I've told people before, I don't care what the earth is. I'm thankful for it. I am. I'm thankful for all of what God supplies. I'm not going to argue about his creation. I've had my optical observations. I've seen things, and so those things I'm highly confident in. But at the same time, I do not trust what I see with my eyes. I don't. Everything in this realm is subject to change based on spiritual decisions, right? So a better question is this. Why is it necessary for any Christian to waste their time proving something that they have not seen with their eyes? Because they don't even know. We know the earth is a specific shape by those who have gone before us, don't we? And by things we've come up with. So why would we even get behind the cause of anybody who would argue is round, square, triangle, or any of those things, when in fact we could spend our time in more fruitful things, right? Plus, I'll never let any tangible thing cause me to target another brother or sister in Christ. I'll never do that, right? I have a friend, he just believes the earth is square, and I say, Jimmy, crack corn. I don't care if he does or does not. We often talk about Christ, right? He has not he's ground-based, so he's not been in the air a lot. He's just not been in the air a lot. And so somebody who's not been in the air a lot, they're going to come up with things like that. There was a guy who believed that the earth was square, and before the whole world, he went up in at the edge of space. And he came down and said, well, it's not square. That's exactly what he said. In fact, it was the architect who put that argument on the internet. Went up and said that himself. But now that the argument has taken on legs of its own, guess what? Nobody believes the person who initiated that argument. They don't believe him anymore. Isn't that funny? So it's grown, a life of its own now. But either way, it's not going to interfere with my relationship with another Christian. I'm not going to let that interfere with anything. No. I don't care what shape the earth is in. I'm just thankful for this opportunity the Lord has given me, period. Okay, let's get this other one real quick here. I got the wrong mouse here, guys. Now, guys, everything is on the table. Anything you want to ask. See, people burn with questions and they want to ask the good ones. But I understand people are trying to stay within context. Somebody says, in the KD files, does it disclose anything about uncovering the truth of the moon? Well, the KD files cannot disclose anything that's going to cause trouble to the site, right? Now, I can give you my opinion, and I do that in the KD files. I give you an opinion based on something I was involved with, right? I do. Because I believe the moon is soon to unmask itself. Now, that term is the slightest way I can put it. The moon is going to really unmask itself. It's not what people think it is. Somebody says, is there truth to music pitch being changed from 432 to 440? Yes, it is. Electronic devices. That frequency of 440 is automatically set there by calibration and design, right? To actually, it's a numbing frequency is what that is. It's a numbing. It can cause you to forget about can put your mind into a different place. Let's put it that way. It's also the beginning of almost like a delta state or theta state, right? 440 hertz. So you should be able to look on any electronic instrument and see that it's automatically set to 440, that 440 band. You should see that. And that all music, radio stations, satellite radio, and everything else is going to have that protective tune, that electronics are going to be designed around that to make sure that that is a carrier frequency that everybody hears. Does it actually cause an effect? You better believe it. You better believe it. You better believe it does. There are people, for example, you guys may not know this, but let's take Twitter, for instance, right? Social media, Twitter. Do you guys know what goes into making something like that? Listen, whenever you get a like or something like that, right? They know what that causes a chemical change in the body of females when they get a like. When you get a thumbs up or somebody likes something, there's a chemical response. There's a hormone release in females. So the more likes a person gets, the more they feel they are approved. It gives them a good feeling. It's positive feedback. It's chemical feedback in the body. That's a fact. There's even a number of seconds that must pass, right, between the posting and messages. And has nothing to do with code, nothing to do with the equipment, processors, or anything else, right? And Donnie says, in males too. No, this is specifically in females. In males, chemical stimuli as response is normally taken as a threat, which will cause anxiety. So they did something else for males. They did something else for males. A thumbs up won't do it for males. Something else does it for males, and they've hit on that point too. In fact, it took, I believe they consulted, was it 928 hours in designing these special mechanisms to interact with you on a chemical level, right? All things are designed like that on a chemical level, and they have it fine-tuned. They have it fine-tuned. Somebody says, Mike, is there anything wrong in my wife? I want to take communion at home. Is there anything wrong if my wife? No, there's nothing wrong with that. If you want to take communion at home. Jesus said, do that in remembrance of him. That's what he said. So do it in remembrance of him, right? Do it, just make sure you're doing remembrance of him. Somebody asked me one time, they said, Mike, what do you think communion is? I'll tell you exactly what I think it is. Communion, right, is commemorating Christ and his walk, the giving of the gospel and everything else, and his death and his resurrection, sitting at the right hand of the Father. It is us remembering why we are alive, our acknowledgement of the Lord. And that act behind that commemoration is done by faith, because you won't do an act like that if you don't believe in it. So whenever we do something for the Lord like that, normally an act of faith is also involved. When we do that, that's honoring Christ and his gospel, right? And what he stands for, and him for what he did for us. That's an acknowledgement. That means you're willing to be a partaker, right? You're willing. Now listen, to be a partaker, to take that communion, right, is to actually be a partaker. A partaker is not somebody who escapes the difficulties of carrying the gospel. Jesus said that you are to take up your cross and follow him. Well, what is a cross? It's that persecution that you carry, right? Now listen to me. He said, take up your cross, didn't he? He didn't say go put it down and pick up something lighter. So that means when you're persecuted, when you're hated, when you're disregarded, when you're called a nut job and all these different things for the sake of the gospel, carry that. You carry that. That's part of following Christ. You carry it. You don't find a place to ditch it, right? You carry that. You got to be willing to carry that cross. There's something that goes along with you. For example, not to start a deep conversation, but you're born with something. You guys are born with something. Now, for most people, what they're born with, they have cast that person aside and have become somebody else. And that person you were originally in the beginning, you put him in a closet somewhere, right? Some of you believed that anybody could be saved, but by way of your peers and what you've been exposed to, you no longer believe that. You put the first person away. That first person carried a natural burden. That first person was disliked by certain people naturally. naturally disliked. There were people that did not know you when you were young and they did not like you. There were certain people that gravitated towards you that wanted to bully you because of who you were. Some of you had so much love and hope for people that you had to put that away because the world didn't work that way. The world made you put that person away to become something else. That person comes with a cross. Now, do you understand that that first person you were came with a burden? Okay, came with a burden. You cannot have what you want in the world and be that first person. And because we wanted something in the world, we put the other person away, becoming something we were not. Well, I'll give you this news. Here's a news flash. Your calling is always connected to that first person. Do you know that? That person that naturally had a way of love about them. That person that they were hurt by other people, but still loved them in return. It was people who convinced you to fight back. It was people who convinced you to put away that kind and decent person that would not lie and to become something else. People taught you that. Your father did not. But you still know about that person locked away. And do you not know this is a story in the Bible of somebody who was put away? Your story is just like a story in the Bible of a person who was put away. Do you know that? The entire time this person was put away, there was no real prosperity in that place. But then they let the person go, and a restoration process took place that nobody could have predicted. God knows exactly what he was doing when he put you here on this earth. That heart you had in the beginning, the heart you put away, the heart that cost you so much, right? That was your first person. The world told you, put that person away. We don't want that person here. But guess what? You went out, you had your friendships and everything else, and it's still not what you wanted. So you find that you gain nothing by putting the first person away. You only experienced the lie of the world that tells you that you can have everything, but because you're marked as a Christian, it doesn't work for you that way, does it? That's what you found out. Because you have a belief, what the world has declared upon you is not true. Because you belong to Christ, and you were bought with a price, and God knew exactly who he put here in the first place. That's why in Revelation, to one of the churches it said, remember, go back to your first love. Remember the first works. Not the ones in between. Remember the first works. Right? There's something in that. Can't you see the world is a liar? Even Jesus said the world cannot have the truth. The world can only handle those things it can hold. The world cannot hold the truth. It cannot have the truth. It is disconnected from the Holy Spirit. That's what our Lord and Savior said. You'll not glean the truth from the world. And it was the world, that was the one that told you to put away that first person. Okay, back to the questions. I can see everybody there. I just got carried away in that conversation. Because that could be a talk all by itself. Couldn't it? What is the digital ID? Is that a mark? No, it isn't. A mark, the mark in the Bible, right, is something that, it's clear in the Word of God that the beast says, right, that as many as would not worship him are killed, but those who do worship him take the mark, right? Worship is voluntary observance. It's kind of like putting on a uniform. Now, I hate to bring it so close to home, but it's like putting on a uniform. You can wear a uniform and be proud of that uniform. Not really even paying attention to all of what behind it. You'll pick the good out of it and wear it anyway, right? But the beast, let's say that uniform was permanent. Once you put it on, you can't take it off. And in order to put it on, you've got to renounce every other sovereignty. That's more like the mark of the beast, right? Nobody's going to be condemned by putting on a jacket. Not going to be condemned because your heart, right? Your free will and everything is towards Christ. But if you were ever to renounce Christ, so would he renounce you. Now, what could cause you to renounce Christ? Someone else who thinks they are more than Christ. And instead of looking to Christ, they would say, you're stupid. I'm right in front of you. Look to me. I don't think that people understand the challenge of the beast is coming anyway. Imagine a person who is both in the physical and spiritual. Imagine a person impervious to any type harm. Imagine a person who commands all the elements, as you know them in the skies, in the heavens, out in space, and in the earth. Imagine a person who comes with warriors, countless warriors, of so many different types that nobody can go against him. And imagine this person giving you a new Genesis, telling you that you did not come from God, that you came from them. In the Bible, it says when they beheld the beast that was, right? That what does it say? That was, is not, but shall be. They wondered whose names were not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world. Now, why would a person wonder if their names were never, ever in the book of life? I'll tell you why. Is if they believe they were from a different origin. And how many people right now, right, in the world, believe that they're from a different planet, that their true origins are from out there in Pleiades constellation or the Orion constellation? When the new constellation is spotted and things begin to happen like that, right? How many people are going to believe they're from this new evil constellation? And when the Orions are seen for what they really are, and indeed, no eye will be able to deny it, how many people are going to fall for that? The very things people laugh and scoff at right now, they're going to fall down and worship very soon. They're not coming in man's timing. They're going to come well before man's timing. See, if they come in man's timing, man will be prepared for it, and he will not be beguiled. If somebody came right now and sat there and said, I'm the beast. If they sat in the temple of God saying, I'm God, people would say, no, I remember that scripture. But what would happen if something came from the stars? Not in a way that we have forecasted. Something just totally blindsided us at a very desperate and difficult time. War breaks out, an earthquake happens. Everybody's beset in their lives. People are dealing with losses, insecurities, and uncertainty. Then all of a sudden somebody comes and they begin to repair things, and they perform a few miracles here and there. People are deeply gracious for that. And that begins to build. And then society is restructured based upon the rebuilding done by someone who did the impossible. At that point, no one will want any of the old to come into the new. They will renounce any other religion that would ever fight or take away the sustenance and supplies this new person is providing. And this new whatever it is providing. They'll believe anything this person puts before them. Why? Because he showed them proof. He didn't ask them to have faith. He stood before them and did it. Isn't that what people say today, even Christians? Well, I don't believe it. I'd have to see it first. That's what Christians say. So guess what? That means the Antichrist is coming. And he's going to show you everything. He's going to prove it right before your face. He's going to do the opposite of being, won't have to use faith with that thing. If it's indeed the Antichrist, he's going to be against Christ, and Christ commands faith. All things work through faith, but not with the Antichrist. He's going to give you your evidence. And people are going to have security in that evidence. They're going to say, finally, no more of the faith in the hubu muju stuff. No more trusting in something I can't see. No more waiting and waiting while I suffer and suffer. No more of that. It's right before me. Now I can follow something concrete. Now I know what I'm part of. This is what they'll say. And when you come along and say, no, have faith, they're going to scoff you out from the place you are. And they're going to tell you never come back. Didn't you see what's coming? Can't you see? Humanity is being molded in situations, are being created. So people fall into that deceitful trap. Those with real faith, those who suffer now, they keep saying, Lord, I'm not moving. I'm suffering, but I'm not moving. Things are not comfortable, but I love you anyway. Somebody's hungry and they're saying, you know what? So what? Lord, I trust you and your guidance. They don't have anything they want, but they're still serving. Those are the ones who will be found faithful. And how would a person be tested to be found faithful? You're going to have a situation. That's how. You're going to look around at your situation. It's going to fall apart. That's going to be your test. You're going to remain faithful or fold. You're going to start compromising so you can get your comfort back, or stay the course with the gospel. You're going to bear your cross or what? Because that's going to be your prove it hour. See, some people, they want it easy in life and follow Christ easily. They don't want any challenges. They don't want that. They want it on the easy street. They want this to be their paradise. They're not willing to sacrifice anything. But see, I can't even have faith that way. Because I know if it doesn't cost me anything, it's not going to have a value. When something costs me, when it really costs me, that's when I give a very real answer. It's like having a friend. Somebody can say, are you my friend? Oh, sure, I'm your friend. But then the whole world goes wrong. There's one last meal to eat for the both of you. That's when you find out if that's your friend or not. You're not going to find out when everything is good. You will find out when everything seems it's going to cost you everything. That's when you find out if love is authentic or not. That's when you find out who your friends are indeed. See, it's when the chips are down. That's when you find out who is who. Not when everything is okay. Okay, somebody else had a question. Let me go back here. Somebody said, I saw the question, but I can't remember. I started yapping again. Hold on. Let me see. Somebody said, I saw something about Mars and it's moving closer to us. Orbits wobble. Mars has a wobble too. So does the Earth. Right? To say that with any surety, there would be an atmospheric type of incident that would take place in intervals. And so when that interval takes place, then I'll be sure about it. I won't be sure until then, so I can't even comment on that. That's the only way I'm going to know. It's the only way. Somebody says, where's it at? Somebody says, let me see, guys. I'm back in Mixler again. Somebody put that thing back up in Mixler because I keep missing it for some reason. Somebody said, answer Janice. I saw Janice, but it whipped by so quick. Somebody repaste Janice's question. Okay, wait a minute. How do you get your spiritual house in order? That begins internally. Listen, if you want your house in order, right? If you want your spiritual house in order, that begins with what you have your mind dedicated towards. Now, hear me on this. If your mind is self-confident within itself, you're not going to get your spiritual house in order. You're going to straighten things up and have absolute control, but that doesn't mean spiritual order. That means your order. When you want your house in spiritual order, right, those directives come directly from the Messiah. And the very first thing he said to do, you guys remember what that was? Hmm? In our own minds, We have our idea on what's right and what's wrong in our own minds. But let me ask you something. Who would actually seek from the Lord what he thinks? And then who would do it? I used to find that I would get in the way of God's word all the time with my own brain. I did. I used to apply missile code, right? That type logic to the word of God. I was very good at my job. Extremely good. But how dumb is that? Those are if then and else statements. Those are modules. Things of that nature. It's not input and output. After some maturity, the first thing that had to change in me was my actual commitment. See, when I'm committed to Mike, I'll defend everything Mike says. When I'm committed to the Lord, that's when I stay silent. That's when I don't go around explaining everything. That's why in this forum, if I speak, I'll give you a certain degree, right? But you don't see me defending everything either. I don't like doctrines either. I don't like that, right? That's why I continue to warn people, don't suppress doctrines here, because that will give you the boot. Quick, fast, in a hurry. We don't do that here. That's a form of debate, and that's not practiced here. Those are things of a reprobate mind. We can't do that. We won't do that here. It's not about who's right, who's wrong. It's about God's order. And you want things in spiritual order, submission is a big part of it. It's a big part of it. And it takes discipline. And it takes living by faith. Not by proof, but by faith. We have confidence by proof. Some people have confidence because they know their check is coming at the end of the month. They know their check is coming at the end of the week. Who would have confidence if they had no idea if they were getting money again or not? But see, that really challenges where you're at, doesn't it? Who would have confidence if they get a bad medical report? See, that really challenges things, doesn't it? Doesn't it? I heard a person who loved the Lord one time say, what's the use? I'm going to be gone anyway. What's the use? Well, what kind of attitude is that? Somebody said something about Noahide laws. I can tell you this. That's a name that hides a ruling faction that is rising in the earth that has nothing to do with Noahide laws. The enemy of Christianity has always come from within Christianity. Remember that. Please remember that. Very seldom does an enemy rise from a strange country. Most enemies rise from within the ranks. Jesus said the enemy is of your own household. Remember that. Remember that. Please remember that. That will give you a lot of clarity. There are folks in this world, they have a plan. I've seen certain books. I won't discuss them. I told you guys what was in one of the books, and it absolutely came to pass, just like I told it to you guys a while ago. It was in a notebook. Those are future policies that will take place. It's like a blueprint. They make it happen every step of the way. You'll never be prepared for what's coming if you're trusting in yourselves and in your own knowledge. Because in a large degree, there are a lot of people already wrong. And if you trust in yourself, you're not going to be willing to see the truth. You're going to be stuck with what you think is the truth. If you can yield to Christ, you'll never fall for tricks. Somebody says, what's beyond the moon? More of creation. Much more of creation. But some things are not worth the discussion, really. Man has been a lot further than what man is willing to tell anybody. But it didn't profit them anything. They just found a new set of issues. It's like going to a beautiful island you never saw before, only to find out you have no supplies. And now you have to learn to hunt and learn the new plant life and learn this and learn that. Somebody said 3 arcs in space. Can you speak more on this? You know what? Most people will see one of them up close and personal. You guys are going to see things. You're going to see things you can't explain. The world's going to see things they can't deny. And it will not be like the movies. It's not going to be like the movies. It'll be more like, can you imagine? I'm going to set the scene for you. Ready? Can you imagine if you guys saw the unbelievable right above, hanging above your, thousands of them hanging above your heads? And then one day they're not there anymore. So you come out one day, everybody sees it. Absolutely nothing happens, and then they're gone. What would that do? What would that do? That'd be nothing like what people expect, right? No attack, no nothing, just kind of show up and then go away. You know what that would do? That would cause a lot of violence on the earth. Do you know why? Because people believe in their own fairy tale. Because if something shows up, surely it's supposed to come and help us and talk to us and all this stuff, right? No. If something showed up and went away, it would be a letdown for a lot of people who believe in their own fantasy. And when that happened, they would be broken of having faith in most things. And if that took place, they would become militant with each other in a matter of days. And if that happened, there'd be no more morals on the earth because people would say, what's the use in life? Now we know there's nothing. And hope would be broken for so many because that's what they're hoping in. They hope that something comes and rescues them from the mess they have caused. And if those things show up and everybody's hopeful like 2012 and then they leave, it's going to be a lot of violence and depression when they're gone. It's going to be a sad day. A very deceitful time is coming. A very deceitful time. And the only sound word we have are the words of Jesus of Nazareth. And that's a treasured word in this hour. Because you really can't trust too many things. Even our history is being undone. And people are still saying trust in men. I don't trust in politics because that's trusting in mankind. Worship of mankind. I don't do that stuff. I trust in the Messiah. Not for his coming back, but what for? He already did some things for me. He did everything for me at the cross. I'm not looking for some future rescue. I'm looking to be obedient no matter what comes, because those are the conditions of which I am sent. I'm not looking for rescue because the Lord put me here and he need not rescue me. He put me here. Why would a parent have to rescue their child? If they just took the child to the room to go to sleep, why would the parent have to come in and rescue the child? They're the ones that put the child there. God put us here. This is not the devil's world. This is God's creation with a bunch of his other creations running around on it. He sanctions or he does not. He's ever present, always. If he spoke peace, every situation will stop. You see, sometimes we think of things in this because of the harm or the danger we have been involved with on the earth. And then we liken that same mindset somehow to our Father and what he's doing here. And that's what we read about yesterday we should not do. Likening God to mankind, likening his ways to the junk that we do here on earth? No way. A devious person will set an innocent person in a dangerous situation. Our Father would not do that. He's not like that. That's why people get so paranoid. They've been watching too many movies. They've been influenced in too many ways. They start thinking of these protectionists, these mindsets. That's unnecessary. It's always been unnecessary. The Lord is asking us questions, and we're giving him a yes or no answer. He's given us all conditions. But the question was, will we absolutely be family in all conditions, no matter what? In other words, if I were to put somebody through a bunch of conditions, right, a crucible, then I would be asking, would you still be a soldier in this condition, in that condition, in this condition? If this doesn't work and if this works, are you still going to be that individual? Because when you're qualifying a person to see what they're going to be, you have to ask them things in truth. In order to ask a person in truth, you have to immerse them in the condition itself. You can't do it by words. You have to do it by an exercise, by a live exercise. It's like saying to a person, will you fold under pressure? If the enemy is shooting back at us, could you still perform this duty? And the person says, yes. You say, okay. So then you call an alert. You take a person on a plane ride for 28 hours. You drop them off on a jungle under live fire, right in the face of the enemy. And you tell him to do his job. And then he cries and says, I can't. I didn't think it would be this rough. Well, then he gave you an answer. He just told you he cannot perform his duties and functions under that type pressure. Right? So now you know what the person is about really beyond his words. Right? That's why it says in the Bible, faith without works is dead. But for that person who goes into that situation and he performs it flawlessly and gets a scar on his arm from a bullet, you get a medical treatment. He answered it too. Yes, I'll do it. Right? It's important to know what a person will and won't do, what they're loyal to and what they're not loyal to. And the only way to find out is put them through a crucible. In every situation we go through, our Father is asking us a question and we're giving him an answer. We're not answering him with our words. We're answering him with a walk. Because we're making choices every step of the way. Do you all see that? See that? We're giving him an honest answer beyond our words. We can say whatever we want, but we're answering him with every step we take. Hopefully everybody sees that. Somebody says, please don't forget. No, I'll update you. I'll get in contact. I sent her out a message. I didn't get anything back yet. Now she did go get that scan. You guys know about that, right? That's a health battle. You guys know how that is. But I want her to tell that health battle. That would be inappropriate for me to blurt out something like that, okay? She has to give you that. Just never seek my health issues. Don't do that. But we'll certainly get that update for her. Let me see. No, I didn't get a response yet. People have challenges these days, guys. Never forget prayer. Never do that. Everybody's having challenges. We really are. Try not to assume. Anybody have any more issues? Let's see. Will COT chat rooms be available to all of us before January 1st, 2023? Is that David Ray? David Ray, we have, let me give you guys this situation so you understand this, right? We have current chat rooms right now that we cannot shut down. They're operation all the time. You guys will be invited in once we get the COT administrators in this one. The other chat rooms have administrators, but the software is not like the ones we're doing here, right? Now, having said that, guys, we have a high demand, right, for the chat API and services and all that good stuff. And I have to be very careful how to do it because we're dealing with finite services. That means if we, like tonight, a lot of people are trying to log in tonight, right? And so what I've been having to do is shut down streams because if we go over, sometimes we go way over what we're allotted every single month, right? When that happens, we can actually shut down. Just so you guys know that we can actually shut down, right? I think we explained this before of what we take in versus, what is owed. Sometimes it does not balance out. We have a catch-up moment, which is, the October month, which is gone. We're in November now. This is the last month we have to make up for anything. And then we kind of level off with these months. If not, we have to back down our services so we can balance everything out. Now, as I'll say it again, mid-2023, I should have the patents back. And through some very diligent work, we'll be able to afford what we once did. But my personal pay is not what it used to be. I took severe cuts in my personal pay, severe cuts. And we're still trying to operate at that same capacity. And so it's a bit different, right? It's a bit different. I used to be able to pocket just about all of it. There's no way that can happen now. That's not happening now. So the donations become very important. I don't actually mention too much about the donations because I believe that should be done spiritually, not coerced, so to speak, right? Not coerced. So there you are. So we're trying to get all this developed. The chat rooms at COT will set the new standard for all the chat rooms. So they have to be, they're going to have to be right. We've gone through 141 iterations of the chat rooms. Our demand continues to rise. That's why I don't say the address so much, because every time I say the address of COT, this is no joke. We get 1,000 more signups or something like that. This is every single time. A lot of people don't know how to get the COT. They really don't. But we've been shut down. We had to switch everything. One time in one day, we had 2.7 million hits in one day. And I thought it was a fluke. I thought something was, messed up. So we went back and we checked the ISP and we had 2.7 million hits. Right. And so all that had to be swapped. Now, having said that too, we have, you guys know what a server is. A server is a computer, right? With two processors in there. Each processor has about 16 processors apiece. These are Xeon processors. They have memory, hard drives, all that good stuff. And so we run a lot of code on that to keep the chat rooms going. I call them floating chat rooms because they're never in one spot, which means you don't host them from just one server. They go out in portions to different places, assemble themselves, and a person uses them. That way they can evaporate and show up in another place or something like that. So you really can't go back to the source and shut the chat room down. You really can't do that. These chat rooms don't operate like that. It's an algorithm put in there where they assemble in random places and stuff like that. Anyway, so we have all that running, and to support these servers run all that code, but they cost money and bandwidth all the time, right? So that's most of our issue right there. Plus all of what we do with it, because we also have data sensors in every state that we get data from. We crunch that data too, because we have to have our own forecasting abilities for atmospheric, land, all that good stuff. Now, all that's in place and paid for, but that's still bandwidth, right? If we lose that, we're going to lose our eyeballs and situational awareness in a lot of places. We have things in a lot of places. We do a lot of data crunching here, right? We also coordinate things in some of our kiosk controls are here too. There are nodes that people will be able to sit down. Well, you guys will see all that because I'm really keen on education, really keen on education. In other words, people suffer because sometimes they just don't know about certain things, right? So there we are. Somebody says, do you like Elon? Do you like Elon anti if you want a blue check? No. Well, I'm not doing any of that. But I'll tell you something, guys. There have been folks, no joke, there have been folks. So I remember one time, 3 months ago, we were at the day before we were about to get cut off. And I don't mention it. I didn't really know about it. And they were touched by the spirit of something. They did. They paid the entire bill for that month. I couldn't, I about fell out my chair. I couldn't believe it. But that, sometimes that happens. And that happened to be a very important time. But listen, I'll never discuss, well, I haven't in the past. It's probably stupid, but I never discussed the position of COT, right? I try to keep everything going, but I also want things authentic. You know what that means? If a person is prompted by the Spirit and they're obedient to the Spirit, then I like that. If you have to prompt something, then the Spirit, where's the Spirit at? That's why at the beginning of the year, I told you guys with your home base, with your churches in your local area, don't let them fail. Don't ever let them fail. Don't let them fail because that's in your hands. That's in your hands. Don't let them fail, right? You can't, the people can't let the church fail and then point the finger at the pastor, who pastors operate by, they function, they live by donations and things like that. They're at the mercy of the people. They really are. I think it's one thing people don't quite get. It's just like a restaurant. If nobody ever had to pay at a restaurant, that restaurant's going to be closed pretty quick, right? So there you go. But let it be authentic, right? Not out of obligation, not out of guilt. Don't give out of guilt. Don't give out of all that other stuff. Give by way of the prompting of the Spirit. Do that. If you do. Anyway, that's where that leads. Now, how do we get on that conversation? Why is pain increasing? Because pressures are fluctuating big time. Pressures are fluctuating big time. And when pressures fluctuate, right, your body tries to balance out that pressure by either swelling or decreasing the fluid circulation within the body. So that pressure differential can cause, it can cause problems, right? If pressure is lower on the outside, your body's going to have to compensate by increasing pressure on the inside, right? Causing swelling. And then vice versa happens in the opposite direction. So that change in pressure causes the bones to hurt more. Now, as we continue to go along and get into places this solar system has not been before, we're going to have lots of pressure changes. As the weather changes, so will the pressure, right? So the weather and pressure go hand in hand. And when these high pressure systems that we're having are strange, they are odd, folks, and here's why. They're causing a pressure change I personally have not seen before. Actually, I take that back. So far, I've seen these trends. I saw these trends back in 93, right? Back in 93, I've seen these trends, but not for the duration we're having them now. So it's almost like things are happening now that just haven't happened before. And the water potential in the atmosphere is concerning to me. Because if it continues on this uptrend, can you guys imagine what the rainfall is going to be like next year? And the sad part about it is it's going to rain. We're going to have a water event. And then after that water event, we're not going to see rain potentially for a few years. All of that is explained. That can be explained by a chart because we'll be on the backside of something by that time. On the backside of this something, right? We're going to have some property changes in our sun itself as it settles back into being what it normally was. And that could take about 20 years. So we're looking at something that has never been recorded in modern times, a place that many generations have not been in for many generations. And it just so happens we have we have land-based technology. We're dependent on the sun. We're dependent on water. We're dependent on, water flow and all these systems staying the same. And it seems like all of them are going to be interrupted. And I'll track it for as long as I can. But what's coming is looking pretty intense, and it's just now beginning, right? It's just now beginning. It is just beginning. Are there ways to mitigate some of the stuff that's happening for yourselves? You better believe it, because there's no way in the world. I can't deal with heat, and heat is rising on the planet. I mean, it's rising big time. I don't like heat. So, I've been in the desert before. I know what it is to be, 100, 115 during the daytime and 20 degrees at night. I know what that is. And I don't like that, right? But I also know how to mitigate it, how to do things so it's not so hard on me. And that may become something you may want to know in the days to come, in the months to come. So, but we've got to get through this winter first. And at some point in the next 2 weeks, we have to have a presentation on what this winter forecast is going to be all about, so that people are informed, right? So that they're informed. I'm going to do my best to assist folks in the many situations I've been into that have really saved my bacon. They really have, and I thank God for them. But I'll do my best to keep folks informed, right? I remember a time where I was not informed, and I really wish I was informed at certain times. And I remember times when I was informed, and it was so sad to see other people who were not, villagers who were there, who were not informed, their people pay the ultimate price because they had no idea something was coming, something like that, right? So you better believe I'm going to take advantage of all the knowledge and everything I've been exposed to and give it out for everybody, so they can at least have something, gotta have something. Gotta have something. Folks, I'm going to see everybody tomorrow. I know that tomorrow's Thursday, but we may have a broadcast prior to the 10:15 broadcast, okay? We may have that. All right? Just may have that. There's a long list of discussions that need to be had, and so we're gonna do our best. Somebody says, what publications are going to be removed from publication? Well, a lot of publications will be revoked. A lot of certificate revocation will take place. Well, listen, guys, we're entering into what's called it's kind of like an open society. And a lot of this people have done this before. It's just not been with computers. Okay. And to really tell you what it is, in all honesty, it's how socialism actually begins. It begins with information. It begins with a demand of information and the dissemination of information. That's how it begins. Socialism always begins the same way. You can go back through history and look at the development of socialism and how it all began. And it began with information. And so pretty soon, everybody will demand to know the status of another, right? That always leads to people being open about everything they think and everything else. And from that point, when they start sharing how they think about everything, in which case we've already done that, then they start separating sections of society. And then they will assign certain classifications to society. Then the re-education begins through various means. That's how it begins. Then all of a sudden the mandates come down the pike, right? I think in our case, the war is going to be an interrupter, and the skies are going to be an interrupter of quite a few things. They're going to interrupt a lot. So it would really pay us to be ready for those interruptions, but to be aware spiritually of what's actually taking place. Folks, we'll see you next time right here at COT, Lord willing. And we'll continue this talk. We still had to finish Romans. We still have to finish Romans. Guys, listen to me. you're now I've reset all the little tick marks in the chat room, right? Because based on people's language and stuff like that, certain people have built up little tick marks. You don't want to build those up because if the system pauses you, that's going to be beyond the moderators. All right. So just be, as the Bible says, right? Be holy in all manner of communication. Just be holy. Compliment one another. Don't undercut each other. Don't do that. Because the system will surely put a tick mark beside you or something like that. And I will post some of the policies for our chat room chatting. Because this week we're getting this thing up there, the new standards implemented and all that stuff this week. Hopefully, Lord, I pray it happens that way. We get everything in there. Moderators should be on board. A lot of people are going to be in the chat rooms, and it's very important that we have some sort of guidelines for chatting. All right. Because the chat room shouldn't be a major issue. It should be a tool, right? Just a tool, not a place where you come and have to watch everything you do and all this, that, and the other. So we'll get the policies and everything out there, get everybody to agree with all those things, and then we'll go from there. But what that's really for is that you may have a belligerent person who may come in drunk and they may start saying all sorts of things, right? You want the computer to catch that just in case everybody else misses that. Not to punish the person, not to say, get out of here, you can't use, because we always want folks to be able to interact with COT. We always want that. All right. We're working on the chat rooms this week. And so we're making some changes. And so you can't work them like you normally do, but we're still going to have observation from the outside. But make no mistake, the moderators, if you're picked for a moderator, your decisions are going to have to be spiritually led, and by the procedures are very simple. But then, and I want everybody to agree to respect the moderators, right? So it shouldn't be a big discussion. Why did you time me out? And all this, that, and the other. If you get timed out, you get timed out, right? You reflect on it and then try it again, right? But also the moderators, they're going to be spiritually prompted, not emotionally prompted, right? No one should boot anybody out because they get mad or they're trying to protect somebody else and all this stuff. That's of flesh, right? These are Christian chat rooms. So it should be spiritually led. Don't you agree? So hopefully we can get all that worked out. Folks, I'm going to see you next time right here at COT. God bless each and every one of you. And as always, thank you for your fellowship. I'll see you guys next time right here at the Council of Time.